Welcome back to another story on Watch Harry. This time, we're bringing you, what if death itself appeared at Gringotts and crowned Harry master of 7 deathly houses and the Hallows. Your likes fuel our creativity. Subscribe and stay tuned. Here's the story. Chapter 1, The Vault That Breathed. The dragon smelled like burning copper and old fear. Harry could feel the heat rolling off its scales even from 40 feet back, where he crouched behind a cart loaded with curse detection equipment that Hermione had charmed silent 3 minutes ago. The beast was chained at 4 points: wrists, ankles, neck, tail, and it had clearly been chained so long that the sound of rattling metal made it flinch before it even registered the threat. Someone had trained it to expect pain whenever it heard that sound. The thought sat in Harry's chest like a stone. "We need to move," Ron whispered. He was pressed against the tunnel wall to Harry's left, his face pale in the greenish glow of the underground torches. "The Gemino curse on the coins is already spreading. If we wait much longer, the whole vault corridor fills up." "I know," Harry said. "Do you have a plan?" "Working on it." "That's a no, then." Hermione appeared between them like she'd materialized from the shadows, which, given the disillusionment charm she'd been holding for the last 10 minutes, was essentially what had happened. She grabbed both their arms. "The clankers," she breathed. "The goblins use them to control the dragon. If we take them and make enough noise, the dragon charges the sound and we ride it out," Harry finished. She blinked. "You've been thinking about this?" "I've been thinking about the dragon, yeah." Ron looked at the beast, the pale, scarred, ancient thing that had spent what was probably a century underground being conditioned to fear the sound of coins, and something moved across his face that Harry recognized. Not pity exactly. Something heavier than that. "All right," Ron said quietly. "Let's get the bloody clankers." They moved fast, low, Griphook scrambling beside them with the nervous energy of someone who had committed treason and was only now fully appreciating the consequences. The goblin had gone very quiet since they'd entered the lower tunnels. He held Gryffindor's sword against his chest like a talisman and his black eyes tracked everything at once. Harry got the clankers first, snatching them off the hook beside the main vault door while Hermione kept the 2 goblin guards imperioused and staring blankly at the wall. He shook them once, experimentally, and the dragon's massive head swung toward him like a compass needle finding north. It exhaled. The heat was extraordinary. Not fire, not yet, but the promise of fire, the warm, pressurized exhalation of a creature that could reduce a man to ash and was deciding whether to bother. Harry shook the clankers again. The dragon screamed and lurched backward, all 4 chains snapping taut. In the half-second of chaos, Hermione blasted the vault door open, not with any finesse, just raw force, the kind of spell that left scorch marks and didn't apologize for them, and the 3 of them plus Griphook tumbled inside. The Lestrange vault was obscene. That was the only word Harry had for it. It wasn't the gold, though there was enough gold to fund a small war, or the artifacts stacked in towers that reached the ceiling, or the weapons mounted on the walls like trophies from 100 dark campaigns. It was the feeling of it. The vault breathed wrongness the way a wound breathes infection. Everything in it had been taken, or cursed, or both. "There," Hermione said, pointing to the far wall where a golden cup sat on a pedestal behind 3 layers of protective enchantments. Even from this distance Harry could feel it, the wrongness of it, the oily, clinging sensation that all the Horcruxes shared. Like something alive that didn't want to be alive, caught in a jar. "The Gemino curse is on everything in here," Griphook said. "Touch anything and it multiplies. The Flagranti curse too, touch it and it burns." "Can you break them?" The goblin's expression was deeply unflattering. "If I could break ancient Lestrange vault curses on demand, would not have needed to come here with 3 humans and a sword that is rightfully mine." "Fair point," Ron said. Hermione was already moving along the perimeter, wand tracing careful arcs, reading the curse architecture the way she read books, fast and total, her lips moving slightly. "The cup itself isn't Gemino cursed," she said. "Just everything around it." If we can reach it without touching the floor items, levitate across, Harry said. The ceiling is cursed too. Of course it is. Harry looked at the cup. Then he looked at Griphook. Can you get to it? The goblin considered this with the focused expression of someone running calculations. Goblin magic is not subject to wizard curses in the same way. I could approach it, yes. Then approach it. And then what? You wish me to hand it to you? After I have already. Griphook stopped. His eyes moved to the sword in his hands and then back to Harry's face, and something in the goblin's expression shifted, recalculating, recategorizing. He had clearly been planning to take the sword and leave at the earliest opportunity, and the fact that Harry was looking at him with calm, unhurried eyes that suggested he'd already worked this out was not what the goblin had expected. Just get us to the cup, Harry said. We can negotiate the rest. The retrieval was ugly and loud. Hermione conjured a rope bridge across the worst of the multiplying gold, every rope copy that spawned glowing hot and useless, but the original held, and Griphook walked it with the steady nerves of someone who had navigated cursed vaults for decades. The cup came off the pedestal without triggering anything additional, which surprised everyone including Griphook, and the goblin carried it back to them with an expression that mixed professional satisfaction with personal suspicion. Then the cup screamed. Not audibly. It was the kind of scream that bypassed the ears entirely and went straight to the base of the skull, a psychic shriek of violated dark magic, the Horcrux realizing it had been touched by someone who intended to destroy it. The sound of Voldemort's soul fragment recognizing its own mortality. Every curse in the vault activated simultaneously. The Gemino gold exploded upward in a wave. Coins multiplied into thousands, then tens of thousands, cascading in a burning flood across every surface. The temperature spiked. Griphook went down, sliding backward into a wall of replicating treasure, and the sword fell from his hands, and all three of them scrambled toward the vault door that was already beginning to close, the automatic security response, Harry realized, the one Griphook had warned them about and then strategically failed to mention had a 30-second timer. Ron hit the door first and braced his shoulder against it, buying 3 seconds. Hermione dove through. Harry reached back for the goblin. Griphook looked at him. It was a very specific look, one that Harry would think about later. Not gratitude, not surprise. More like the look of someone who has built a wall and watched another person walk straight through it without noticing the wall was there. Harry grabbed his arm and hauled him through the door just before it sealed. The corridor outside was full of alarms. Run, Harry said. They ran. The dragon was already straining against its chains when they burst back into the main chamber, the sound of alarms triggering every anxiety the creature had been conditioned to hold. Harry still had the clankers. He made a decision in about half a second, the kind of decision that didn't feel like a decision so much as an obvious geometric truth, and he shook the clankers twice, hard, directly at the dragon's face. Every chain on the beast snapped from the violence of its recoil. "Oh no," said Ron. "Grab on," said Harry. "To the dragon?" "To the dragon." They grabbed the dragon. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't anything close to graceful. Hermione latched onto a spine behind the creature's left shoulder with both hands and both knees and an expression of absolute concentrated determination. Ron got a fistful of scale and swung himself up with the kind of athletic improvisation that Quidditch had apparently prepared him for better than anything else. Harry went up last, pulling Griphook after him with one hand while the dragon lurched toward the massive entrance tunnel, dragging the remnants of its chains and decades of captivity and heading toward the first daylight it had seen in a century. The tunnel was not big enough. The dragon made it big enough. Stone exploded around them as the creature simply pushed, not intelligently but with the complete physical commitment of an animal that wanted out and had decided that walls were a suggestion. Harry flattened himself against the scales and the wind screamed and then, suddenly, violently, gloriously, they were outside. Sunlight. The dragon hit the open air of Diagon Alley and screamed again, but differently this time, not pain, not fear. Something that had been suppressed so long it had no clean word anymore. It climbed, fast, with a desperation that had nothing to do with them and everything to do with the sky. Harry looked down. Diagon Alley was very small and getting smaller. People were scattering in every direction. The white marble face of Gringotts receded below them, goblin guards spilling out the front doors looking up with expressions that ranged from fury to genuine religious terror. "We should probably get off the dragon," Hermione said, her hair a complete catastrophe, her voice perfectly reasonable. "Probably," Harry agreed. "Before it gets much higher." "Agreed." Harry. Jumping. They jumped. The fall lasted about 4 seconds before Harry's disillusionment charm caught them and Hermione's cushioning spell redistributed the impact across a rooftop on the edge of Diagon Alley. They hit hard but alive. Griphook bounced once and sat up with an expression of profound indignity. Ron rolled and came up in a crouch with Gryffindor's sword somehow still in his hand, though Harry had no memory of him grabbing it from the goblin. Neither did Griphook, apparently, because the goblin stared at the sword in Ron's hand with the focused attention of someone doing very fast and unhappy arithmetic. "The sword stays with us," Harry said, before the goblin could speak. "That sword is a conversation for later." Harry was already scanning the rooftop, the street below, the rapidly shrinking shape of the dragon disappearing northeast. "Right now I need you to answer one question." Griphook waited, jaw tight. "That vault," Harry said. "The lower tunnels, below the Lestrange level, what's down there?" Something moved in the goblin's eyes. "You felt it." "I felt something. When the alarms triggered. Something below the vault floor, not the curses, something else." "What is it?" Griphook was quiet for a long moment. Long enough that Harry could hear the distant sounds of Diagon Alley below them, shouts, running feet, someone crying. Long enough that Hermione had looked up from examining the cup with the basilisk fang she'd had the foresight to bring, her expression moving between the cup and Harry's face. "There are levels to Gringotts that the Goblin Nation does not fully understand," Griphook said finally. "Levels that predate the bank. Predate magic as your kind practices it. The lowest vault, Vault 0, we call it, though it has no number in any record, was sealed at the founding of the bank. No key has ever opened it." He paused. "Until today." Harry stared at him. "It opened?" "When the Horcrux screamed," Griphook said. "Yes. I felt it through the stone." "Something down there answered." The three of them looked at each other. Ron spoke first. "We're going back in, aren't we?" "We have to," Hermione said softly, and she didn't sound uncertain about it, which was somehow more unsettling than if she had. She was looking at the cup, the Horcrux she'd been about to destroy, and then she lowered the basilisk fang. "Harry. If there's something down there that responded to the Horcrux, it might be another one. Or something worse. Or something we need." Harry was already moving toward the roof access. "And we're here, and it's open, and this might be the only chance we get." "The goblins will be swarming the tunnels," Griphook said. "Will they go to Vault 0? Another pause. "No goblin has gone below the 4th sublevel in 300 years. There are stories, there are always stories." Harry looked at the goblin. "Come with us or don't. That's genuinely up to you." Griphook stood, brushed replicating gold dust off his jacket with meticulous care, and picked up a discarded clanker from the rooftop where it had fallen from Harry's pocket during the landing. He tapped it against his palm twice, thoughtfully. "I will come," he said. "But you should know, if what is in that vault is what the oldest goblin record suggests it is, then none of your magic will protect you." "What do the oldest goblin records suggest it is?" Hermione asked. Griphook looked at her with those flat, ancient eyes. "Something that was old before magic had a name. Getting back in was almost harder than getting out." "Almost." The chaos of the dragon escape had pushed every goblin guard toward the upper levels and the front entrances, which meant the lower access tunnels, the service passages that ran beneath the main cart tracks, were moving toward empty in exactly the wrong direction for security response. Harry led them in through a drainage grate that Hermione opened with a quiet, surgical spell that left no trace. The stone down here was older. You could tell not from any visual cue but from the way sound behaved, too absorbed, too swallowed, like the rock had been eating echoes for so long it was full. They moved fast and low, Griphook leading now, navigating by some internal sense that had no name in English. Past the second sublevel. Past the third. Down into the fourth, where the torches were spaced 40 feet apart and the spaces between them were genuinely dark in a way that Harry's Lumos charm barely touched. The vault doors on this level are decorative, Griphook murmured as they passed rows of sealed doors so old the metal had oxidized to black. Nothing has been stored here in living memory. But there are still wards. Don't touch the doors. What happens if we touch the doors? Ron asked. The last goblin who touched one is still touching it, Griphook said pleasantly. Ron put both hands in his pockets. Below the fourth level there were no torches. There were also, technically, no stairs. What there was a passage that went down at an angle steep enough to require care, and walls that had been carved rather than built, the marks of chisel work so old that the tool lines had smoothed to gentle curves under centuries of touching air. The stone here was darker than the levels above. Not granite. Something older than granite. Something that predated the geological record of the British Isles with cheerful indifference. Harry kept his wand lit and tried not to think about the weight of rock above him. He felt it before he saw it. A warmth, first, not the aggressive heat of the dragon or the fever warmth of activated curses, but something slower and more total, like sunlight through stone, like the memory of a fire. And then a sound that wasn't exactly a sound, more like the awareness that sound was occurring below the threshold of hearing, the way you could sometimes sense music in a building before you consciously registered it. And then the door. It was not large, which surprised him. Every dramatic thing in Harry's experience had been large: Hogwarts, dragons, the Chamber of Secrets, Voldemort's silhouette against the sky. This door was maybe 6 feet tall and 4 feet wide, and it was made of something that might have been stone but moved light the way metal does, and it was covered in markings that were not runes, not any rune system Hermione had ever studied, based on her sharp intake of breath, but something that arranged itself in patterns that the eye wanted to follow and the brain couldn't quite resolve. And it was open. Not wide open. An inch, perhaps, ajar the way a door left open by a careless hand is ajar. But the warmth was coming from that inch of space, and the not sound, and something else that Harry had no word for at all. An attention. The specific, focused attention of something vast looking at something small and finding it exactly what it had been waiting for. Vault 0, Griphook said, and his voice was very quiet. Stay here, Harry said. Harry, Hermione started. Both of you. Griphook. He turned around. All three of them were looking at him with varying expressions of concern and readiness and the specific kind of fear that comes not from not trusting the person in front of you but from not trusting the universe around them. I'm not leaving you. I'm just going to look. People who just look at ominous ancient chambers tend to end up as cautionary tales, Ron said. I'll be quick. That's what they all say. Harry pushed the door open and walked through. The room on the other side was not a vault. It was a space. That was the most honest word for it, not a chamber, not a room, not a hall, just a volume of existence that seemed to have been set aside for a purpose and then held in reserve, the way you might keep a seat at a table. The walls were the same ancient stone as the passage but curved here, and the curve made the space feel less enclosed than open, the way a cupped hand feels more like shelter than a cage. And the floor was the strangest part. It was perfectly flat and perfectly dark, and Harry's wand light landed on it and scattered, like light on still water, but the floor wasn't water. It was something that merely remembered water. In the center of the room, a figure stood. Not standing the way a person stands, weight distributed, muscles engaged, the constant minor adjustments that living bodies make. Standing the way a thing stands when it has no weight to distribute and no need for adjustment. Still in the way that only truly patient things are still. Harry stopped walking. The figure was tall and wore something that was probably a cloak, the way a shadow is probably darkness, definitional, inevitable, not separate from the thing it covered. No face that Harry could see. No hands. No sense of threat, either, and that was the part that his survival instincts couldn't process correctly, because everything about the visual information was threat, and yet the feeling in the room was not fear. It was the feeling of a very long wait coming to a very quiet end. "Harry Potter," said the figure. The voice was not loud. It did not need to be. "Yes," Harry said. He didn't feel the need to be clever about it. "You carry all three." It wasn't a question. "The cloak you inherited. The stone you have touched. The wand you took from its last master." "Draco Malfoy," Harry said. "I took the Ollivander wand from him at Malfoy Manor. The Elder Wand's allegiance transferred." "I know." A pause that felt like weather changing. "You understand what that means?" "I've been told it means I'm Master of Death," Harry said. "I'm honestly not sure what that means in practice." Something in the figure's stillness shifted, not physically, but in some deeper way, like the pressure changing in a room before a storm. It has never been practiced before. Every holder of the Hallows in history has possessed them separately or briefly or without full understanding. You are the first to hold all three with conscious knowledge of what they are. Another pause. You destroyed a fragment of a shattered soul tonight. In doing so, you cracked something that had been sealed since this bank was founded. The resonance of a soul fragment's death is one of the few forces capable of disturbing a seal of this age. "What seal?" "Mine," said Death. Harry looked at the figure for a long moment. The wand light in his hand was steady. His heartbeat was steady. He thought about Cedric, about Sirius, about Dumbledore, about his parents, every person he'd stood at the edge of losing or already lost, and he thought about the fact that this was the thing that had taken them, that took everyone eventually, that was older than the concept of taking, and he found that he wasn't afraid. "Your death," he said. "I am the function," said the figure. "I am the mechanism by which existence becomes legacy. I am neither villain nor friend. I am the thing that everything leads to." A beat. "I have been waiting for you specifically." "For how long?" "Since the Peverell brothers made their bargain." Harry did the mental arithmetic. "That's a very long time." "Yes." If a voice that had no identifiable source could carry something like dry amusement, this one did. "You are the culmination of a contract made before your kind had surnames. Ignotus Peverell accepted the cloak and hid from me. He was patient. But his blood was always going to arrive here. Your blood has been arriving here for generations, Harry Potter. You are simply the generation that finally walked through the door." "You said you've been waiting," Harry said slowly. "That sounds like you want something." "Not want. Acknowledge." Death moved, glided, perhaps, though there were no feet to confirm the motion, and stopped closer than before. The attention was enormous up close. Not threatening. Just total. Like being the only thing in a very large eye. The Hallows are instruments. Instruments require a hand. You are the hand. But the contract was incomplete. Ignotus hid. Antioch fought. Cadmus begged. None of them accepted the full weight of what the bargain was meant to create. What was it meant to create? "Order," said Death. "Not law, order. There is a difference. Law is what the living make to govern each other. Order is what exists when death and life are properly balanced, when the boundary between them is respected by those with enough power to violate it. The not voice was very even, very clear. Your world has spent decades hemorrhaging that balance. A man split his soul 7 times. Wraiths walk. The dead are bound into objects. The living are marked with curses that recruit them to the service of someone who cannot die. A pause. I am not supposed to care about such things. But I have interests. Such as? The restoration of 7 houses, said Death. Houses that existed before your Hogwarts, before your ministry, before the statute of secrecy, houses that were bound into the original contract with the Peverills. Houses that have fallen, fragmented, been stolen, been forgotten. Houses that, when properly restored to their lord, will give that lord authority over the magical world that no ministry vote or dark magic can override. Harry was very quiet. You are offering me lordship, he said. I am offering you acknowledgement, Death corrected. The lordship already exists. It has been accruing to your bloodline for 3 centuries. I am offering to formalize it. To give it weight in the world. To place in your hands the authority that was always meant to be there. A beat. And to ask, in return, that you do what you were always going to do anyway, end the imbalance. Close the breach. Return the boundaries of death to where they belong. Destroy Voldemort's Horcruxes. And Voldemort himself. Yes. I was already going to do that. I know, said Death. But you were going to do it scared, outnumbered, and operating largely by improvisation. Something that was definitely dry amusement. This way, you do it as a lord with legitimate authority, 7 houses worth of magical inheritance, and the 3 instruments that collectively make you the single most powerful magical entity currently walking the earth. Harry thought about this for about 4 seconds. What are the 7 houses? He asked. You already know some of them, Death said, and raised one hand, or rather, something gestured where a hand would be, and light appeared in the room. Not wand light. Something older, something amber and deep, like firelight translated through time. In that light, Harry could see words arranged in a circle on the floor, 7 names in an archaic script that his eyes somehow read without effort, as if the knowledge of the reading had arrived simultaneously with the words themselves. Peveril. Gaunt. Slytherin. Ravenclaw. Gryffindor. Hufflepuff. Emrys. Harry stared at the last name for a very long time. Emrys, he said. As in Merlin. Merlin Emrys, yes. His house never properly passed to an heir. It has been in abeyance for 13 centuries. A pause. Your bloodline is sufficient. I'm not descended from Merlin. You are descended from Ignotus Peveril, Death said. Ignotus was descended from a line that predates the Norman conquest. The magical bloodlines of Britain, before they were fragmented by politics and war, converged in fewer families than your historians acknowledge. Merlin's house does not require direct descent. It requires acknowledgement by the sitting Master of Death, who alone has the authority to seat an heir. Another pause. I am acknowledging you. Harry took a breath. House Gaunt, he said. That's Voldemort's family. Was, said Death. The house itself is neutral. It predates Tom Riddle by a great deal. His corruption of it is temporary. His hold on it ends when he does. And House Slytherin. Salazar Slytherin had no legitimate heirs. The house has been claimed falsely by those who shared his bigotry without his ability for 3 centuries. You are Parseltongue. You have faced the basilisk. You have been sorted by a hat that placed you in Gryffindor only because you asked, and asking was the most Slytherin thing imaginable. Death seemed almost entertained by this. You qualify. Gryffindor and Slytherin simultaneously is going to cause some arguments. Good, said Death simply. Arguments are better than wars. You being above both factions is the point. Harry looked at the names in the circle a moment longer. Then he looked up at the figure before him. If I agree to this, the houses, the formal authority, what does it actually look like? What can I do that I couldn't do before? Walk into any room in the wizarding world and be the highest authority in it, Death said. Claim seats on every governing body. Veto ministry actions. Convene a new Wisengamot or dissolve the existing one. Break curses that would otherwise require committee approval. Access vaults, records, and artifacts that have been sealed for centuries. A beat. And the 3 Hallows will function at their full capacity in your hands rather than a fraction of it. The Elder Wand already, you have been using it as a wand, Death said, with something that was almost pity. It is not a wand. It is a key. What it unlocks, in the hands of the true Master of Death, is considerably more than the capacity to cast spells at a higher power. Death paused. You will understand once the acknowledgement is made. Harry was quiet for a moment. Not hesitating, thinking. Processing. Doing the thing that Hermione was better at but that Harry had learned to do quickly in the years since Voldemort's name had first attached itself to his life like a second shadow. 2 conditions, he said. Name them. The Hallows stay mine in a custodial sense only. When this is over, when Voldemort is gone and the balance is restored, they go back where they belong. The stone goes back into the forest. The wand is buried with Dumbledore. The cloak passes to my children. He paused. My children keep it forever. That part isn't negotiable. Agreed, said Death, without hesitation. Second condition. The authority I'm given, it doesn't make me a king. I don't want a throne. I want enough power to do what needs doing and then I want to be left alone to live a normal life. He paused. Or as normal as I can manage. The lordship is real but I'm not ruling anything permanently. The houses reform. The authority is real. But once the balance is restored, the governance goes back to the people. Death was silent for a moment. You are the first Peveril heir in 30 generations to negotiate with me, it said. Is that a yes? That is an observation, said Death. And yes. The circle on the floor began to glow. Not dramatically, not the thunderclap, lightning strike transformation of a story that wants you to feel every moment of it. Quietly. The amber light deepening from 7 points, the names rising slightly as if the stone were breathing them upward, and a warmth that started in Harry's chest and moved outward to the tips of his fingers like something more. Actions request aborted. Write the next chapter now. Chapter 2, 7 Seals, 7 Names. The warmth didn't stop at his fingertips. It went through them, through the skin, through the bone, through whatever layer of a person exists below the physical and above the metaphorical, and settled somewhere that Harry couldn't point to but could feel with complete certainty. Like a lock turning. Like a door, very far away, opening onto a room that had been furnished and waiting for years. His scar didn't hurt. That was the first thing he noticed clearly. The scar that had burned and throbbed and screamed at him for 16 years of his life was quiet. Not numb, quiet. The difference between a wound that has been suppressed and a wound that has actually healed was enormous, and Harry stood in the center of that difference for a moment and just breathed. The 7 names on the floor faded back into the stone. The amber light retracted to nothing. Death was still present, he could feel that, the way you feel a change in atmospheric pressure, but the figure itself had become less defined, more like a suggestion at the edge of his vision. The acknowledgement is made, Death said. The voice was already slightly further away. You will feel the weight of it in the coming days. The houses will stir. Old magic will wake. Do not be alarmed by what answers. Helpful, Harry said. It is all the help I am permitted to give directly, said Death. The rest is yours. A pause. You have 2 friends waiting outside a door who are, I suspect, approximately 30 seconds from coming through it regardless of what you told them. Harry almost smiled. Yeah. That sounds right. Go, said Death. And then, with the finality of something that has said everything it needed to say and sees no reason to pad the ending, Harry Potter. Do not waste this. I won't, Harry said. He walked back through the door. Hermione came through it from the other side at almost exactly the same moment, and they nearly collided in the doorway, and she grabbed his arm with both hands the way she did when she was checking that he was still physically real. You were in there for 11 minutes, she said. We were, I'm fine. You look, she stopped, studying his face with the focused attention of someone reading a text in a difficult language. Different. Do I? Yes. She didn't elaborate immediately. She just kept looking, cataloging, her eyes doing the thing they did when she was processing something too large for her usual frameworks. What happened in there? Ron appeared at her shoulder, slightly out of breath, Gryffindor's sword still in hand. Griphook was behind him, and the goblin's expression had moved entirely past suspicion into something that looked almost like awe, which was considerably more unsettling on a goblin's face than suspicion had been. We should move, Harry said. I'll explain above ground. Harry, Hermione. I promise I'll tell you everything, but right now there are approximately 40 goblin guards between us and the surface and I'd rather explain while we're not being arrested. She let go of his arm. Fine. But you're telling me everything. Everything, he agreed. Getting out the second time was quieter than the first. The goblin security had concentrated on the upper levels and the exterior, which left the deep tunnels temporarily emptied in a way that felt like held breath. Griphook led them through service passages that Harry suspected weren't on any official Gringotts schematic, narrow, low-ceilinged corridors that smelled of old stone and older magic, branching in directions that defied the sense of direction that humans used above ground. Twice they heard voices, goblin voices, rapid and clipped, the language moving too fast for Harry to follow. Twice Griphook made a sharp gesture and they all pressed into doorways or side passages and went still. Twice the voices passed. The third time, they didn't. For goblin guards rounded a corner 12 feet ahead of them, and everyone froze for a half-second that felt considerably longer, and Harry had his wand up before any conscious decision reached the part of his brain that was supposed to make them. He felt the Elder Wand differently now. He'd been aware of it as a tool, an exceptionally good tool, responsive and powerful in a way his Holly Wand had never been, humming with a competence that felt borrowed rather than intrinsic. Now it felt like an extension. Not of his arm, of his intent. The gap between what he wanted to happen and what the wand did had closed to something barely measurable. He cast a silencing charm, a mass confundus, and a targeted memory charm in about a second and a half, and the 4 guards stood blinking at the wall with the expressions of people who have entirely forgotten why they came to this corridor. Ron stared at him. That was 4 spells, Ron said. 3 spells, Harry said. I saw 4 distinct, the silencing charm covered all 4 of them simultaneously. So technically it was 3. Ron opened his mouth, closed it, and looked at Hermione, who was also staring. Right, she said quietly. Yes. We need to have a very long conversation. They came out through a drainage exit that led out onto a side street 3 blocks from the main Gringotts entrance, squinting in the late morning sun. Diagon Alley was still chaotic, they could hear the sounds of it from here, the residual panic of a dragon escape that people were still processing, owls moving fast overhead carrying urgent messages to urgent places. Harry looked at Griphook. Thank you, he said. For the guidance through the lower tunnels. The goblin regarded him with those flat, ancient eyes. Something in them had changed, not softened, exactly. Reorganized. What were you acknowledged as? Griphook asked. No preamble, no circling. In Vault 0. Master of Death, Harry said. Heir to 7 houses. Including House Peveril. He paused. I imagine your records mention the Peveril founding contract. Griphook went very still. Those records are sealed. I know. But you know what's in them. A long pause. The goblin's jaw worked slightly, the internal calculation visible on his face, everything Griphook had believed about the balance of power between goblin and wizard being rapidly, forcibly revised. The contract, Griphook said carefully, specifies that the Peveril heir, upon acknowledgement by the entity party to the original bargain, is owed recognition by the goblin nation as a peer sovereign. Not a client. Not a patron. He paused. A peer. That's what I understood, Harry said. This has never been invoked. First time for everything. Griphook stared at him for another long moment. Then, slowly, with the specific deliberateness of something that costs a great deal, the goblin inclined his head. Not a bow, goblins didn't bow, Harry knew, and wouldn't, and he didn't want them to. An inclination. An acknowledgement. Peer to peer. The sword, Griphook said. Is Godric Gryffindor's, Harry said. Who was the lord of a house that is now one of the 7. Which means it falls under my authority as head of House Gryffindor. He paused. But I'm not going to be unreasonable about it. The sword has been at Hogwarts for 1,000 years. When this is over, it goes back. Griphook held his gaze. And in the meantime? Harry looked at Ron. Ron looked at the sword in his hand and then held it out to Harry. Harry took it and held it for a moment, feeling the weight of it, the extraordinary balance, the sense that the object was slightly more present than its physical dimensions justified, and then handed it back to Ron. He carries it, Harry said. He's earned it. Ron looked briefly startled, then squared his shoulders and held the sword properly, with the grip of someone who'd been playing chess all his life and understood that what mattered wasn't the piece, it was how you used it. Griphook watched this exchange and then said, with something approaching respect, I will return to the bank and manage the reporting of this morning's events in a manner that does not specify your access to the lower tunnels. I appreciate that. In exchange, the goblin continued, I will require a formal meeting. When your affairs are in order. There are contractual matters between the Goblin Nation and the Peveril House that have been unresolved for 3 centuries, and I intend to resolve them. Agreed, Harry said. Griphook left without ceremony, moving back toward a side entrance to the bank with the air of someone who has just renegotiated everything and is already planning the next 3 moves. Harry turned to Hermione and Ron. Right, he said. Right, Hermione said. She had her arms crossed and her expression was the one she wore when she was controlling a very large amount of emotional response through sheer intellectual focus. Start from the beginning. He told them everything on a rooftop in the East End of London, sitting cross-legged on warm stone while the city moved below them, the Horcrux cup between them wrapped in Hermione's charmed cloth, the sword laid across Ron's knees. He talked for nearly 20 minutes, which was unusual for him, and neither of them interrupted much, which was unusual for them. When he finished, Hermione was quiet for a long time. 7 houses, she said finally. 7. Peveril, Gaunt, Slytherin, Ravenclaw, Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, and Emrys. She said them carefully, like testing the structural integrity of each one. Harry, the last living claimant to the Hogwarts founders' houses, is a point of ongoing legal dispute that the Wisengamot has been arguing about for literally 200 years. If you walk in there claiming all 4 founders' lines simultaneously, plus Peveril, Gaunt, and Emrys. Plus those 3, yes, and if you're claiming Merlin's house as well, you're not just the most politically powerful wizard alive, you're, Harry, there isn't a precedent for what you'd be. I know, he said. That's somewhat the point. Ron had been quiet during most of this, which meant he was thinking hard. He tapped the flat of the sword blade against his knee. The Death Eaters, he said. Voldemort. What happens when they find out? Some of them will be terrified, Harry said. Some of them will refuse to believe it. And Voldemort himself, he paused. He'll come after me harder than he already was. He's spent his whole life accumulating power through fear and ancestry and the appearance of inevitability. If I show up holding 7 house lordships and the endorsement of death itself, it undermines everything he's built. Good, Ron said simply. It's also dangerous, Hermione said. Harry, you can't just walk up to the Ministry and announce this. Umbridge and the Death Eaters have the Ministry. The Wizengamot is compromised. If you try to claim your seats formally before the war is over, they'll just try to kill you in a more official-looking way. I'm not going to the Ministry first, Harry said. Then where? I'm going to deal with the Horcruxes. He looked at the wrapped cup between them. Then I'm going to deal with the people hiding from Voldemort who should be fighting him instead. And then I'm going to deal with Voldemort. He paused. In that order. The political stuff happens afterward. Hermione looked at him for a long moment. You sound different, she said. When you talk about this. You sound, I don't know. Settled. I feel settled. That's either very reassuring or very worrying. Probably both, Harry said, and she almost smiled, which was the right response. They destroyed the cup that afternoon. Hermione drove the basilisk Fong through it in a courtyard behind an abandoned warehouse in Bermondsey, and the soul fragment inside it died the way all the Horcruxes died, badly, loudly, with a sound like something tearing that bypassed the physical entirely. The usual wave of psychic assault came, the Horcrux throwing its worst at whoever was closest. Hermione got the brunt of it, a barrage of her deepest fears rendered in hallucinatory clarity, but Harry put his hand on her shoulder and something moved through the contact, some quality of the acknowledgement he was carrying, and the hallucination fractured and dissolved in about 3 seconds. Hermione looked at the broken cup and then at Harry. What did you do? I'm not entirely sure, he said honestly. It felt like pushing back against something that didn't have the standing to be there. The Horcrux couldn't touch you. It tried. It just, he thought about how to describe it. Couldn't find purchase. Like it expected to grab something and found nothing to hold on to. Ron crouched over the remnants of the cup. 2 down, he said. The locket, the cup. He looked up. 4 to go, if Nagini counts. Nagini counts, Harry said. And there might be one more we haven't identified yet. Dumbledore thought 7 Horcruxes total, Hermione said. Including Voldemort himself, Harry said. The piece of soul he kept. 7 pieces, 6 objects. He was quiet for a moment. We need to find the others. The diadem of Ravenclaw, I think it's at Hogwarts. The ring is already destroyed. The diary is already gone. That leaves the locket, which we need to get from Umbridge, Ron said with feeling. Which we're getting from Umbridge, Harry agreed. And Nagini. Nagini, Ron repeated. She stays close to Voldemort. She's the last one we deal with. Grand. Ron stood up and brushed dust off his knees. So to summarize. We're breaking into the Ministry next. Looks like. After everything that just happened. I know. We just escaped from Gringotts on a dragon. I remember, I was there. Right. Ron picked up Gryffindor's sword. Just checking you weren't planning a rest first. Harry almost laughed. Tonight we rest. Grimmauld Place. Creature can feed us and we can plan. Tomorrow we start moving. Something shifted in him as he said it, not urgency, not the anxious drive of someone trying to stay ahead of disaster. Something forward-facing and deliberate. The difference between running from something and moving toward something. He'd spent 6 years running. He was done with running. Grimmauld Place was cold and dim when they arrived, though Creature had anticipated them. He always anticipated them now, since Harry had given him Regulus Black's locket and the relationship between them had undergone its strange, gradual thaw. A fire was burning in the kitchen, food was laid out, and the old house elf was standing at the stove with an expression that on any other creature would have been called something close to satisfaction. Masters have returned, Creature said. Creature heard about the dragon. News travels fast, Ron said, helping himself immediately to what appeared to be a proper meal, the first in days. Creature has many ears in many places, the elf said with dignity. Harry sat down. The warmth of the acknowledgement was still in him, less noticeable than it had been immediately after, settling into the background of his awareness the way a new piece of knowledge settles into the background of your understanding. He found he was hungry in a way that was specifically physical, his body catching up with a morning that had asked a great deal of it. He ate. After dinner, after Ron had fallen asleep on the kitchen bench in the immediate and absolute way that only genuinely exhausted people sleep, Hermione sat across the table from Harry with a cup of tea and the look of someone who has been waiting to ask the real question all day. "The Elder Wand," she said. "Yes. You used it differently today." "In the tunnels." "Yes." "How much differently?" She wrapped both hands around her cup. "Harry, I need to understand what we're working with. Not because I want to limit what you do, I don't, not after everything. But because I need to know what's possible now, and what the risks are, and what we should be planning for." Harry thought about how to answer this honestly. "It's not that it's more powerful," he said slowly. "Or, it is, but that's not the primary thing. It's that the gap between what I intend and what it does has basically closed. Before, even with the Elder Wand, there was some translation, I suppose. The spell had to go through the instrument. Now the instrument is more like a conductor than a translator." Hermione processed this. "What about non-wand magic? The thing you did when the Horcrux attacked me, I don't fully understand that yet. But it worked." "Yes." She looked at her tea. "Death told you the Hallows would function at full capacity now. What does full capacity mean for the invisibility cloak and the resurrection stone?" Harry pulled the cloak from his pocket. He'd had it since they'd retrieved it at Malfoy Manor, and it folded into something impossibly small in his hand, always had. He spread it on the table between them. Even lying flat, there was something different about it. The silvery fabric seemed to absorb the firelight rather than reflect it, and the edges of it were slightly difficult to focus on, as if the cloak was only conditionally committed to occupying that particular space. "I haven't tested it," he said. "But I think it's not just invisibility now. I think it's absence. Complete absence. Not just from sight. From magical detection?" Hermione's eyes sharpened. "From everything," Harry said. "I think if I put it on, I disappear from every tracking mechanism, every detection charm, every location spell. Including Voldemort's." Hermione sat very still for a moment. "That changes a significant number of our strategic options." "Yes." "The stone," she said quietly. "Have you thought about the stone?" He had. He had thought about it in the way you think about something you're not quite ready to pick up yet, turning it over in your mind, approaching it from different angles, not quite touching it. He'd carried it in a small pouch at his chest since he'd first found it, and it was there now, warm against his skin in a way that felt less like an object's warmth and more like something biological. "I know what you're thinking," he said. "Harry, I'm not going to misuse it," he said. "I know what it did to Dumbledore. I know what it did to Cadmus. I'm not going to spend the war calling back everyone I've lost." He paused. "But as a tool, for information, for counsel, used carefully and briefly, that's exactly what Dumbledore thought," Hermione said, but gently. "Dumbledore had the ring on his hand," Harry said. "He activated it without thinking, without preparing. I'm aware of what it does. I know the person I'd be tempted to call back." He met her eyes. "And I'm telling you now that I won't. Not because I don't want to. Because it wouldn't be fair to them." She looked at him for a long time. "All right," she said finally. And then, very quietly, "Serious?" "Yes." Neither of them said anything else about that. Harry woke at 3 in the morning with the clear, specific awareness that something had changed in the magical fabric of Grimmauld Place, and not in a threatening way, more the way a house changes when weather shifts outside, the whole structure settling and adjusting. He lay still for a moment, reading it, and then he got up and went downstairs. The Black family tapestry was moving. Not its names, the names were static, the family tree burned and blasted the way Walburga Black had left it, but the fabric itself. The borders of it. The ornate woven surround that ran around the edges of the family tree was shifting, the golden thread of it rearranging itself with a slow, botanical patience, growing new branches in the margins, extending in directions that hadn't been there yesterday. Harry stood in front of it for a long moment. The new growth, if that was the word, was converging on a central point in the upper border. 7 branches, growing toward each other. And where they were meeting, the thread was weaving itself into a seal. A crest. Not the Black family crest and not anything Harry recognized, but something that felt designed rather than inherited, the visual representation of something being formalized. "Creature," Harry said softly. The elf appeared immediately, which meant he'd been awake and nearby. "Master," he said. His eyes were on the tapestry. "Do you know what this is?" Creature was quiet for a long moment, his gaze tracking the slow movement of the golden thread. "Old magic," he said finally. "Creature has not seen this in all his years of service to this house. But Creature has read the old books." He paused. The Black family was, connected to several of the ancient houses by blood and by contract. When a true lord is acknowledged, the connecting bloodlines register it. He looked at Harry with his enormous, lamp-like eyes. "The tapestry is acknowledging master." Harry watched the crest taking shape in the upper border. It was slow, meticulous, the thread moving with a precision that no human hand could match. He could see the outlines of it now, 7 interlocking elements, one for each house, arranged around a central symbol that he couldn't quite resolve yet. "Go back to bed, Creature," he said. "Creature does not require, go back to bed," Harry said again, warmly. "I'm fine. I'm just watching." The elf departed with the quietness that house elves had perfected over centuries of occupying spaces without being present in them. Harry pulled a chair up to the tapestry and sat down and watched the crest form. By 4 in the morning, it was complete. He studied it for a while. 7 sections, each rendered in a different tone of gold, from deep amber at the Peveril section to bright clear yellow at the Hufflepuff, from forest dark at the Slytherin to something that was nearly silver at the Emrys. At the center, the symbol that connected them all, a triangle, a circle, and a line. The Deathly Hallows mark, but rendered differently than the version on Xenophilius Lovegood's necklace or the cover of the Tales of Beetle the Bard. Bigger. More deliberate. The kind of symbol that isn't just referencing a thing but is the thing. He thought about what death had said about order, and balance, and the difference between law and the thing underneath law. He thought about 7 houses, 4 of which were the founders of Hogwarts, the school that had been the center of his world since he was 11. He thought about what it meant to be the head of the house that Salazar Slytherin had built and simultaneously the heir of Godric Gryffindor, the 2 houses that had been at ideological war for 1,000 years. He thought about the fact that every person who had ever sneered at him for being a half-blood, for being unworthy, for being an accident and a charity case and a boy who lived in a cupboard, every person who had built their power on the idea that blood purity was the measure of magical worth, was about to find out that the boy who grew up in a cupboard under the stairs had just been formally acknowledged as the heir to more ancient magical authority than all of their combined family trees. He found he wasn't particularly vindictive about it. It wasn't satisfaction or revenge that moved through him when he considered it. It was something quieter. Something like resolution. The next morning, Harry laid everything out at the kitchen table. Not metaphorically, literally. Maps, notes, the mental inventory of Horcrux locations that he and Hermione had been building for months, the intelligence they'd gathered from Order members, the fragments of information that Creature had contributed from decades of eavesdropping on some of the most indiscreet dark wizards in Britain. He arranged it like a chess problem, which was the right analogy because Ron immediately saw the structure of it and began asking questions that cut straight to the strategic core. "The locket is at the Ministry," Harry said. "Umbridge has it. Which means we need to get in and get to her without triggering the full security apparatus," Hermione said. "Polyjuice," Ron said. "Yes. Same plan as before, we target Ministry officials who have access to Umbridge's level. Get in, get the locket, get out." "And the diadem," Hermione said. "Ravenclaw's diadem. You said it's at Hogwarts." "The room of requirement," Harry said. I think it's in there with all the other hidden things. I've been in that room. There's a whole section that's like a warehouse of things people have hidden over the centuries." He paused. "Helena Ravenclaw's ghost knows where it is." "The Grey Lady." Hermione looked at him. "How do you know the Grey Lady knows?" "I asked a portrait once, when I was trying to find out about the diadem in 6th year." He paused. "She told me the diadem went missing after the founder died. I didn't know what to do with that then. Now I know." "That leaves Nagini," Ron said. "Who is essentially Voldemort's most protected possession. We deal with Nagini last. We deal with everything else first and we deal with Nagini when we're ready." Harry looked at the maps. "There's one other thing." Both of them waited. "I need to make contact with people," Harry said. "Specifically, I need to reach the Order members who are still active, and Neville, and Luna, and the people who are already organizing resistance at Hogwarts." He paused. "What I was acknowledged as, the 7 houses, the authority, it's real, but it needs witnesses. It needs to land somewhere tangible in the world before it becomes something people can act on." "You want to tell the Order," Hermione said. "I want to tell the people I trust. And then I want to use what I've been given to do the thing it was given for." He looked at both of them. "I'm not hiding. Not anymore. I'm done with that." Ron grinned, a quick, sharp grin that had nothing complicated in it. "About time," he said. "The Order first or the Ministry?" Hermione asked. "Ministry," Harry said. "Get the locket. Destroy it. Then we open contact with the Order and tell them what's happening." He paused. "And then we go to Hogwarts. We get the diadem and we talk to Neville and we see what's being built there." "What about Snape?" Ron asked. The question was flat and careful. "Snape is at Hogwarts," Harry said. "As headmaster." "As headmaster," Harry confirmed. "I'm going to have to deal with that." He was quiet for a moment. "Not yet. But soon." "He's working for Voldemort," Ron said. "He was working for Dumbledore," Hermione said quietly, and Ron looked at her sharply. "I've been thinking about it more since we found Dumbledore's letter at Grimmauld. What he told Harry at the end. The way Dumbledore trusted Snape completely." She paused. "I don't know what the truth is. But I'm not certain we know either." "He killed Dumbledore," Ron said. "Yes," Hermione said. "And I don't know why." She looked at Harry. "Do you?" Harry thought about Dumbledore. About everything the old man had done and not said and arranged and hidden and prepared. About a life spent 3 steps ahead of everyone, moving pieces with a chess master's vision and a saint's certainty. About the portrait in the headmaster's office that he'd never gone back to visit. "Not yet," Harry said. "But I will." The Ministry infiltration took 3 days to plan and 1 day to execute. Harry, Ron, and Hermione entered the Ministry of Magic on a Tuesday at 9:45 in the morning wearing the faces of mid-level administrative staff whose polyjuiced identities Hermione had assembled with the thoroughness of someone writing an academic paper, complete behavioral profiles, access levels, known associates, habitual routes through the building. They had hairs, they had schedules, they had the kind of prepared cover stories that could survive most casual questions. They were inside for 6 hours. most of it was waiting. The Ministry of Magic under Voldemort's control was a place of enforced calm, not peace, nothing as comfortable as peace, but the specific stillness of an institution that has learned to perform normality for the benefit of something watching. Harry had been in the Ministry before, under better circumstances and worse, and the change was visceral. The golden statues were gone, replaced by the massive sculpture of wizards dominating Muggles that made his teeth ache. Muggle-born Registration Commission notices were everywhere. Staff moved with the careful, practiced neutrality of people who had learned that being noticed led nowhere good. He walked through it with Hermione's stolen face and thought about order, and law, and the distance between them. The locket was in Umbridge's office, which they reached through the 4th floor using credentials that Hermione had spent 2 days perfecting. The woman herself was not there. She was running a registration committee hearing 1 floor down, her voice audible as they passed the stairs, bright and terrible and thoroughly convinced of its own kindness. Hermione opened the office in 4 seconds. Ron pulled the locket from the locked case inside the desk in 2 more. Harry scanned for alarms, found 2, neutralized both, and they were back in the corridor in under a minute. 6 hours of preparation. 3 minutes of execution. They were out of the building before Umbridge's hearing finished. They destroyed the locket that evening. It was Ron who drove the basilisk fang through it, steady-handed and set-jawed, because Harry put it to him without ceremony and Ron took it the same way. The Horcrux tried to break him, it went for his insecurities, his fears, the same pressure points it had been pressing on him for months through the chain of the thing against his skin. But Ron had already faced those things when he came back in the forest, and the Horcrux was reaching for a version of him that no longer quite existed, and the fang went down clean. When it was over, Ron sat with his hands on his knees and breathed for a moment. 4 down, Harry said. The diary, the ring, the cup, the locket. 3 to go, Hermione said. The diadem, Nagini, and, she stopped. Harry looked at her. She was looking at him with an expression that was very careful and very serious. Dumbledore's pensive memories, she said. The ones he showed you in 6th year. The ones about Voldemort's past. She paused. He told you about all the Horcruxes he knew of. But he also told you there were pieces of the story he hadn't yet assembled. Yes. There's a 7th object, she said. Beyond Nagini. We keep assuming Nagini is the last one because she's the last one Dumbledore mentioned, but he explicitly said he wasn't certain. She paused. I think there's something we're missing. Harry was quiet for a long moment. The warmth in his chest, the thing the acknowledgement had left there, pulsed once, very gently. Like a prompt. He thought about what Death had said about the soul fragment breach. About the screaming of the Horcrux in the vault. About a connection that had existed between him and Voldemort since he was a year old, a connection that his scar had mediated, that legitimacy had deepened, that every Horcrux encounter had tugged at. He thought about what he hadn't let himself fully think about since the war began. There is something we're missing, he said. He didn't say what. Not yet. He wasn't ready to say it yet. But he thought he knew what it was. He thought he'd known for a while. Chapter 3, The Lord of the Unbroken Line. The Wizengamot hadn't had a full session in 3 months. Hermione had found this out through a contact in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, a junior clerk named Perkins who had been quietly feeding information to the Order since October and who communicated exclusively through encrypted letters that rearranged themselves into gibberish after being read once. The Wizengamot still existed technically, still convened in the underground chamber beneath the Ministry, but Voldemort's people had been systematically emptying the seats of anyone who might vote against them, retiring people early, relocating families, manufacturing reasons for absence. What remained was a quorum of the compliant and the frightened, rubber-stamping whatever the Death Eater contingent brought before them. Harry read Perkins' latest letter over breakfast and felt the shape of the problem clearly. Power worked through legitimacy. Even Voldemort, who could simply kill people who disagreed, understood this, which was why he'd taken the Ministry quietly, through infiltration and manipulation, rather than by open conquest. Open conquest created martyrs and resistance. Quiet infiltration created confusion and paralysis. The counter to confusion and paralysis was clarity. "I want to call a Wizengamot session," Harry said. Hermione and Ron both looked up from their respective breakfasts. "A full session," Harry continued. "Not just the compromised ones who are already sitting. A full session, with every witch and wizard who holds or has held a Wizengamot seat in the last 30 years. He paused. "And I want to call it as Lord of the Seven Houses." Hermione set down her tea. "Harry, the Death Eaters control the Ministry building." "A session there, not at the Ministry," he said. "At Hogwarts." The silence that followed was the specific silence of two people processing something large. "The Great Hall," Hermione said slowly. "It's big enough. And Hogwarts is on enchanted ground that predates the Ministry by 400 years. The Founder's Law, original wizarding law, specifies that the Great Hall of Hogwarts can serve as a session chamber in times when the Ministry is compromised." He looked at her. "You know this. You've read it." She had. He could see it in her face, the slight quickening, the involuntary acknowledgement of research suddenly becoming relevant. "Hogwarts Founding Charter, 3rd Clause," she said. "Emergency legislative convocation." "Yes. It's been invoked exactly twice in history." She paused. "And Snape is headmaster." "I know. Harry, I know," he said again. "Which is why we go to Hogwarts first. We get the diadem, we deal with the Snape situation, and then we issue the convocation notice." He looked at the letter from Perkins. "We need to move quickly. Voldemort isn't sitting still. Every day we plan, he consolidates." "What about Neville and the others?" Ron asked. "You said you wanted to contact the people already organizing at Hogwarts." "Neville is part of the reason we go to Hogwarts," Harry said. "He's been building something in there. I want to see it." He sent 2 letters that morning, one through Creature's network of contacts to Arthur Weasley, who was still at the Ministry and still trusted and still the kind of stubborn, decent man who would tell the truth in a burning building. The other to Kingsley Shacklebolt, who was both a senior order member and one of the few wizards with enough standing and enough spine to begin the legal process of an emergency Wizengamot convocation. Neither letter mentioned the 7 houses. Not yet. That news needed to land in person, with Harry visible and present, or it would be dismissed as rumor, fabricated enemy propaganda, or both. They apparat to Hogsmeade at dusk. The village was wrong in ways that were specific and unnerving. Not ruined, physically it looked much as Harry remembered, the same stone buildings and sloping rooftops and the distant flicker of the 3 broomsticks-lit windows. But the texture of the place was off. The streets were empty at an hour when they shouldn't have been. Windows were shuttered that didn't usually shut. The specific sensory weight of a community under surveillance, the quietness of people who have learned to pretend they don't see things, was everywhere. 2 Death Eaters were standing at the junction of the main road and the path to Hogwarts. They were talking to each other with the relaxed manner of people who expect nothing to interrupt them. Harry walked toward them. Ron grabbed his arm. "Harry, I know." He didn't stop walking. "Stay with me." Ron let go. Both he and Hermione fell into step beside him. The Death Eaters noticed them at about 30 feet. One of them, tall, heavy-set, with the particular sneer of someone who had spent years practicing it, moved forward with his hand going to his wand. "Students are not permitted in Hogsmeade without, I'm not a student," Harry said. The Death Eater looked at him. At the scar. At the Elder Wand in Harry's hand, which Harry hadn't raised and wasn't raising, just carrying, loose, easy, not pointed at anything but present in a way that the Elder Wand was very, very good at being present. The other Death Eater had gone still in a way that suggested some instinct below conscious thought had fired. "Potter," the heavy-set one said. His voice had changed. You've got, he was reaching for his dark mark, the instinctive alert, the call to Voldemort, his left sleeve rolling up. Harry cast a stunning spell and a binding jinx simultaneously. Both Death Eaters hit the ground without time for surprise. Dragged into an alley, Hermione said, already moving, getting a grip on the nearer one. Obviously, Ron said, taking the other. They tucked both men neatly into a side passage and left them with a memory charm that would give them approximately 8 hours of lost time and no record of what had removed it. Hermione performed the memory charm because hers were cleaner than Harry's and cleaner than Ron's, and she'd always been better at the subtle ones. They'll send a signal when we pass the wards, Hermione said, looking toward Hogwarts. Snape will know we're here. Yes, Harry said. And you're, yes. She studied him. You want him to know. I want everyone to know, Harry said. We're done with sneaking, Hermione. We did what we needed to do quietly while we figured things out. Now we've figured things out. The path to Hogwarts ran upward through the dark with the specific familiarity of something that lives in your memory at a level below nostalgia, not warm, exactly, but bodily. Harry had walked this path hundreds of times in various states of adventure and disaster and ordinary routine, and his feet knew the angle of it, the places where the paving became uneven, the point at which the castle first became visible above the tree line. He saw the castle now and felt nothing sentimental. He felt clear. The gates opened when he approached them, which should have required a staff member or an authorization from the headmaster's office, and did neither. They simply opened, the iron swinging inward with a sound that was very loud in the quiet evening air, as if the castle itself was expressing an opinion. Harry walked through without breaking stride. Hogwarts recognizes the houses, Hermione said softly, watching the gates. 4 of the 7 are the founders. It knows. Apparently, Harry said. The entrance hall was lit and warm, which meant there were students still here. A number of families had kept their children home this year, but a number hadn't, couldn't, or weren't allowed to, and the sound of the castle living its evening rhythms came from above. Distant footsteps, the sound of a class finishing somewhere on the 2nd floor, a professor's voice echoing down a staircase in a register too muffled to identify. Neville Longbottom came around a corner at speed and stopped dead when he saw them. He looked different. Not just older, more shaped. Like something that had been soft-edged in memory had been reformed by pressure into something harder and more defined. There was a cut above his left eyebrow that had healed badly, and his robes were slightly too short in a way that suggested he'd grown recently and hadn't been in a position to care about it, and he was carrying a length of rope over one shoulder that Harry chose not to ask about immediately. Then Neville's face split into an expression that was roughly equal parts relief, disbelief, and the specific joy of someone who has been holding a line in a dark corridor and has just heard reinforcements coming. You're actually here, Neville said. We're actually here, Harry said. Neville crossed the space between them in 4 steps and grabbed Harry in a brief, solid embrace that communicated more than most conversations. Then he stepped back and looked at all 3 of them with sharp, assessing eyes that Harry hadn't seen in him before, the eyes of someone who had been running something difficult and had learned to read situations quickly. How bad is it? Harry asked. The Carrows, Neville said, and the word carried the specific weight of something that has become both a noun and an assessment. Alecto and Amicus. Dark arts and Muggle studies, effectively torture and propaganda. There, it's bad. He paused. But we've been managing. The DA, Hermione said. About 20 core members. Maybe 30 who support us when needed. Neville's jaw tightened slightly. We've been protecting younger students mostly. Giving them places to go when things when they need to not be visible. He paused again. We haven't been able to stop what's happening, but we've made it considerably more inconvenient. Where are Luna and Ginny? Harry asked. Neville's expression shifted. Luna was taken off the Hogwarts Express in December. Zeno Lovegood, her father, He was cooperating with Voldemort in exchange for her safety, but then when you visited the Quibbler, she's at Malfoy Manor, Harry said. He'd known this, or suspected it, and the confirmation landed in his chest with a dull, specific weight. Yes. Ginny's here. Neville paused and the ghost of a grin crossed his face. Ginny is very much here. She's been the most aggressive of all of us, honestly. I've had to physically stop her from hexing Amicus twice in the last month. That sounds about right, Ron said. Snape knows you're in the castle, Neville said. The ward sent a message. He hasn't sent anyone down yet, which is either because he's deciding what to do, Harry said. Or because he knows he can't actually stop you, Neville said carefully. Harry looked up the main staircase. The school above him was full of students and 2 Death Eaters masquerading as teachers and 1 Death Eater masquerading as a headmaster, and somewhere in this building was the most valuable piece of information he'd need to destroy Voldemort, and somewhere else in this building was the fragment of a dead dark wizard's soul hidden in a diadem that had been missing for 1,000 years. Take me to the room of requirement, Harry said. And on the way, find Ginny and have her meet us there. Ginny was already in the corridor outside the room of requirement when they arrived, which was either coincidence or the kind of situational awareness that Harry associated more with her than with most people twice her age. She was leaning against the wall with her arms crossed and the expression she wore when she was very pleased to be right about something. She looked at Harry. He looked at her. A great deal passed between them in about 2 seconds that neither of them felt the need to narrate. Took you long enough, she said. We've been busy, he said. I heard about the dragon. Everyone heard about the dragon. She pushed off the wall and fell into step beside him as he paced the corridor. What do you need? The diadem of Ravenclaw. It's somewhere in the hidden storage section of the room of requirement. She didn't ask how he knew. She had always had the useful quality of moving toward the next thing. The Grey Lady told me about the diadem once, actually, she said. Last year, when I was in Ravenclaw Tower for a study group. She was, Ginny paused. Not hostile. Sad. The kind of sad that's been going on so long it doesn't really feel like sadness anymore. Another pause. Someone asked her about the lost diadem and she talked about it without really meaning to, I think. She mentioned that a student had once found it. Many years ago. Voldemort, Harry said. Ginny looked at him sharply. You think he was here as a student and he came back after as Tom Riddle to ask for a teaching position that Dumbledore refused. He hid the diadem here. Made it into a Horcrux and hid it. He paused. In this room. The door materialized on the 3rd pass. The room of hidden things was exactly as Harry remembered it, a space the size of a cathedral filled with the accumulated discarded secrets of decades of Hogwarts students and staff, towers of forgotten objects climbing toward a ceiling lost in shadow. The smell of dust and old magic and wood shavings and the specific mustiness of things that haven't been moved in a long time. It could be anywhere in here, Hermione said, looking at the towers of objects with the expression of someone calculating a genuinely large number. No, Harry said. He closed his eyes for a moment. The warmth in his chest, the thing that had settled there in Vault 0, was different in here. Directional. The wrongness of the Horcrux was something he could read now the way you read a smell, something that went straight past the conscious mind to the part of the brain that made primitive assessments. This way. He moved through the stacks with the others following. Past broken furniture, broken cauldrons, broken assumptions about what things were worth keeping. Past rolled carpets and cracked mirrors and stacked boxes that shifted slightly as they passed, the logic of the room doing what it always did, accommodating whoever was navigating it. The diadem was on a stone bust of a warlock, on a shelf, next to a cabinet that had been broken and repaired and broken again. Sitting there like a forgotten piece of homework, like someone had set it down and not come back for it. The gemstone in its center was blue, and even from 6 feet away the wrongness of it was unmistakable, the same oily, clinging, look away quality that all the Horcruxes shared. Harry picked it up. It tried to do the thing the others had done, reach for the pressure points, the vulnerabilities, the specific fears that Voldemort's soul fragment had stored up like ammunition. But the thing in his chest met it the way a current meets an obstacle, not fighting it, just refusing it. The diadem's reach hit the warmth of the acknowledgement and simply stopped, the way water stops at glass. Harry held it out to Neville. "You've been carrying this school on your back for 7 months," he said. "Do you want to be the one to?" Neville looked at the diadem. At the basilisk fong Harry produced from his jacket. At Harry's face. Something moved across his expression that was complicated and quiet and entirely real. "Yes," Neville said. He took the fong. He drove it through the diadem and the soul fragment inside it died with the now familiar sound of something being violently, necessarily unmade. The silence after was the good kind. Ginny squeezed Neville's shoulder once. He straightened. 5, Ron said. He didn't need to say what 5 meant. Nagini, Hermione said. And, Harry cut across her. Not because he didn't want to face it, but because he needed to face the headmaster first and the rest of the conversation required that to be done. "Snape first," he said. "Then we talk about the rest." Severus Snape was in the headmaster's office. Of course he was. He'd been there since the wards had registered Harry's arrival, which meant Harry checked his internal timeline, about 40 minutes to decide what he was going to say and how he was going to say it. 40 minutes was enough time for a man of Snape's intelligence to run through approximately every conversation this could possibly be, which meant Harry was walking into something prepared. He walked in anyway. Just Harry, he'd asked the others to wait in the corridor. This conversation needed to happen without audience. The office was the same as it always was, except for the portraits on the walls, which were more numerous now than they'd been in Dumbledore's time, and which were watching Harry with a range of expressions, several with open interest, 1 or 2 with barely concealed anxiety. Dumbledore's portrait was in its usual position above the mantelpiece, and the portrait was awake, and the portrait's eyes were doing the thing Dumbledore's eyes always did, that particular quality of attention that felt like being measured for something you hadn't known you were going to need. Harry looked at the portrait for a moment and then looked at Snape. Snape was standing behind the desk. Not sitting, standing. His hands were clasped behind his back and his expression was the expression he'd worn for 6 years at Harry, the carefully maintained neutrality that covered something else with the patience of someone who has been maintaining it for a very long time. "Potter," he said. "Professor," Harry said. A pause. "You've been busy," Snape said. "People keep saying that." Snape's eyes moved to the Elder Wand in Harry's hand, and something in them changed, not alarm, something more like recognition, the fast internal recalculation of someone encountering a variable they'd expected but not this early. "The Elder Wand," he said. "From Draco," Harry said. "At Malfoy Manor." "I know how wand lore works, Potter." "Then you know what it means that I have it." Snape was quiet for a moment. "How much do you know?" he said finally, and the question was different from anything Harry had ever heard from him, stripped of the performance, just the actual question underneath. "I know Dumbledore asked you to kill him," Harry said. "I know he was dying from the ring curse before you did. I know you've been feeding information to someone, probably Dumbledore's specific instructions, arranged in advance, coming through someone I haven't identified yet. And I know that every horrible thing you've done since you came back to this school has been in service of keeping the students here alive, because that's what he asked you to do, and you've done it." Snape said nothing. "I don't need you to confirm it," Harry said. "I'm not here to have that conversation. I'm here because I need to know 2 things, and I think you're the only person who can tell me both of them." Snape watched him with those flat, unreadable eyes. "Ask." "The 7th Horcrux," Harry said. "The one that Dumbledore suspected but hadn't confirmed. Is it what I think it is?" Something moved in Snape's face. Something that had been held against itself for a long time. What do you think it is? He said carefully. Me, Harry said. The portrait above the mantelpiece made a very quiet sound. Snape's expression didn't change, which was its own kind of confirmation. Dumbledore believed, he said, spacing the words very carefully, that on the night Voldemort killed your parents, when the killing curse rebounded, it shattered the soul so violently that a fragment attached itself to the only living thing in the room. The surviving child. He paused. You have carried a piece of Voldemort's soul inside you since you were 15 months old. Harry breathed steadily. And to destroy the last Horcrux, you would need to die, Snape said. Or more precisely, the piece of Voldemort inside you would need to be destroyed, which amounts to the same thing. He paused. Dumbledore believed you would need to go to your death willingly. That you would need to let Voldemort kill you. Did he plan to tell me this? At the right moment, Snape said. He believed, he calculated that you needed to reach a certain point before knowing. That knowing too early would alter you. Harry looked at him for a long time. He was probably right, he said, which was not what Snape had expected. He could tell. But things have changed. I see that, Snape said, very quietly. The second thing, Harry said. Dumbledore's plan, the full plan, not the pieces he gave to different people. The complete picture. Do you have it? Most of it, Snape said. Tell me. Snape told him. It took 11 minutes and Harry listened without interrupting, standing in the middle of the headmaster's office with the Elder Wand at his side and the castle around him and Dumbledore's portrait watching from above, and heard the full shape of everything the old man had built, all the pieces Harry had had and the pieces he hadn't, the timeline and the logic and the places where Dumbledore had been certain and the places where he'd calculated and hoped. It was a good plan. Harry could see that clearly. It was a plan built for a Harry who didn't know about the 7 houses, who didn't carry the acknowledgement of death, who would have to die and come back and hope that the soul fragment's destruction in that death was sufficient to end Voldemort's immortality. A plan built for a boy who had to sacrifice himself. I'm not going to die, Harry said, when Snape finished. Snape looked at him. The Horcrux, I know about the Horcrux, Harry said. And I know there's a way to destroy it that doesn't require dying. Dumbledore found no such way. Dumbledore didn't know what I know, Harry said. He looked up at the portrait above the mantelpiece. Did you? The portrait of Albus Dumbledore looked at him with those painted blue eyes that somehow managed to contain the entire quality of the man they represented. I suspected, the portrait said, and the voice was quiet and a little rough, the way a voice gets when it's been held for a long time. I suspected that the acknowledgement changed the parameters. But I had no certainty. What acknowledgement? Snape said sharply, looking between them. Show him, the portrait said to Harry. Harry considered this for a moment. Then he produced the small pouch from inside his jacket and opened it on the desk, the stone, catching the firelight in a way that no ordinary stone caught firelight. He laid the Elder Wand beside it. He drew the cloak from his pocket and let it settle across the desk with its impossible quality of presence and absence simultaneously. Snape looked at all 3 objects on the desk. He looked at Harry's face. He looked at the Elder Wand, the wand he had taken from Dumbledore's portrait and delivered, as instructed, because Dumbledore had wanted Voldemort to believe that Snape was its master and Nagini's killing of Snape would transfer mastery to no one. The wand that had, instead, transferred its allegiance to Harry months before Snape was involved in any of it. The Master of Death, Snape said, and the 3 words came out very differently from how Harry expected, not with disbelief, not with contempt, but with something that might have been the specific complicated relief of someone who has been carrying a plan that was never quite going to be enough. Yes, Harry said. The soul fragment, Snape said slowly, thinking through it as he spoke. If the Master of Death has dominion over the boundary between life and death, the soul fragment is on the wrong side of that boundary. It's a piece of the dead in the living. Yes, Harry said again. You could compel it. Order it. Something like that. Harry gathered the objects back. I think I can separate it. Remove it without killing myself. I'm not certain. But I think I can. You think, Snape said, with a return of the old inflection. I've been reasonably right about things recently, Harry said mildly. Something happened in Snape's face then that Harry had never seen there before. It passed quickly, too quickly to name fully, but it was something in the vicinity of recognition, of one particular version of a person giving way to another, of a long-held position shifting on its foundations. What do you need from me? Snape said. Organize the student body, Harry said. I'm calling a Wizengamot session. 2 days. The Great Hall. I need this school running. I need students protected and Carrows contained and the Order members I'm about to notify to be able to reach Hogwarts without walking into a Death Eater trap. He paused. Can you manage the Carrows? Alecto and Amicus are mine to manage, Snape said flatly. They have been managed. He paused. They have not harmed the students under my watch. I want that noted. Noted, Harry said. He turned to go. Potter. He stopped. Dumbledore was right about one thing, Snape said. The voice was very even, very controlled, the way voices get when the thing being said is being said exactly once and both parties know it. He told me, when we made our arrangement, that the boy he'd known in first year would become something that neither of them could fully anticipate. That Lily's nature and James's stubbornness and the specific pressure of a life like yours would eventually produce something that no plan could entirely account for. A pause. He was right. Harry looked at him for a moment. I'll put in a good word with whoever's running the War Crimes Tribunal, Harry said. Snape almost, made an expression that could have been interpreted as a response to humor. How generous, he said dryly. Harry left the office. In the corridor, all 4 of them, Ron, Hermione, Neville, Ginny, looked at him with varying degrees of expectation. He's with us, Harry said. Let's get everyone together. The next 2 days were an exercise in organized chaos that Hermione managed with the focused intensity of someone who has found their natural element. Messages went out through the network. Arthur Weasley, Kingsley Shacklebolt, Minerva McGonagall, who was at the school in her capacity as deputy headmistress and who had responded to the news of Harry's presence with the specific expression of someone who has been right about something for a very long time. Mundungus Fletcher, useless but connected. Aberforth Dumbledore at the Hog's Head, who communicated through a portrait that Harry recognized from somewhere and then placed, Ariana. The portrait of Ariana Dumbledore, linking Aberforth's pub to Hogwarts through a passage that had been functioning as a secret route for months. The DA reconvened in the room of requirement on the first evening. Harry stood in front of 30 faces, some familiar, some aged past their years, some carrying marks of the Carrows' attentions that made him quietly furious, and didn't give a speech. He didn't explain the 7 houses or the acknowledgement or the authority he was carrying. He just told them what was happening, what was coming, and what he needed, with the directness of someone who respects the people they're talking to. 2 days, he said. We call the Wizengamot here. Voldemort will know. He'll respond. When he does, we fight on ground we know, with every advantage we can gather. He paused. I'm not going to stand here and tell you it'll be easy. It won't. But I'm going to tell you that this ends. I'm going to tell you that I know how to end it. He paused again. Trust me or don't. But if you're in, I need you ready. Not a single person left the room. The convocation notices went out by dawn, magically sealed, carrying the formal seal of the 7 houses that the tapestry at Grimmauld Place had woven, signed with Harry's name and the ancient formula that Hermione had found in a Hogwarts charter document dated 1024. Every sitting and former Wizengamot member in Britain received one. So did a number of people who weren't Wizengamot members but needed to hear what was coming. Voldemort received a copy. Harry had insisted on this. The look on Hermione's face when he'd said it had moved through 4 distinct stages in about 3 seconds, but she hadn't argued, because she understood the logic. This was not a secret gathering. This was a declaration. Kingsley arrived through the Hog's Head passage that evening, along with 6 Order members and the specific air of a man who has been waiting for news like this for months and is still processing the reality of it. He looked at Harry with the careful, measuring look of someone extremely competent evaluating a new variable. "The 7 houses," Kingsley said. "You're certain?" "Yes. The Death Eaters are going to say it's fabricated." "They can say what they like," Harry said. "The magic is real. The acknowledgement is documented in Gringotts' oldest records and in the founding charter of this school. Let them argue." Kingsley was quiet for a moment. "What about the seat on the Wisengamot? 7 house lordships give you, Harry, you'd have more votes than anyone in the history of the institution." 7 seats, Harry said. "Proxies for all 7 houses. My votes in a legitimate session of the full Wisengamot are enough to pass any measure I want, including emergency wartime powers." He paused. "Which I intend to use exactly once, to formally end the current illegal governance and restore legitimate authority. Then the votes go back to the membership." Kingsley studied him. "You could hold on to them." "I know. Most people would." "I know that too," Harry said. "That's exactly why I won't." On the morning of the session, the Great Hall looked different. McGonagall had transformed it overnight, the house tables removed, concentric rows of chairs arranged in the session format, the enchanted ceiling showing a clear autumn sky, and at the front of the room, a speaking dais that hadn't been there yesterday. The school's house banners had been replaced by something neutral, and above the dais, the 7-house crest from the Grimmauld Place tapestry had been conjured in 3 dimensions, turning slowly, its different golden tones catching the light. People had been arriving since before dawn. Some through the front gates. Some through the Hog's Head passage. Some by through fireplaces that Snape had temporarily authorized. There were ministry officials who had come quietly, speaking in low voices, their expressions ranging from cautious to openly relieved. There were former Wisengamot members who had been forced out and hadn't thought they'd ever see a legitimate session again. There were Order members, DA graduates, Hogwarts staff, a delegation from the magical community in Scotland that Harry hadn't expected and was quietly moved by. There was a sizable number of people who had come because they'd received the notice and were somewhere between uncertain and hostile, which was fine. Uncertain and hostile meant they were present and listening, which was all Harry needed from them. There were no Death Eaters in the room. Yet. Harry stood at the door of the Great Hall with Ron and Hermione and looked at approximately 260 people waiting for something to happen. He felt Ron's hand briefly on his shoulder, the specific communication of someone who has been beside you for 6 years and doesn't need words for most of what matters. "You're good?" Ron said. "Yes," Harry said. "You don't need to convince them," Hermione said quietly. "The authority is real. The recognition will either happen or it won't, but you don't have to perform for them." "I know," Harry said. "That's why it's going to work." He walked into the Great Hall. The room went quiet in a wave, the way sound dies when a signal change ripples through a crowd. Harry walked the length of it to the dais without hurrying. He didn't perform the walk, didn't make it ceremonial or solemn or anything other than what it was, which was a person walking from one end of a room to the other. But the Elder Wand was visible in his hand, and the crest above the dais turned as he approached it, and the quality of the silence in the room was the quality of people experiencing something they can feel in their bones before they fully understand it with their minds. He stepped up to the dais. "My name is Harry Potter," he said, which was the most ordinary possible opening, and he heard the small sound of the room recalibrating. "Most of you know me as the boy who survived Voldemort's killing curse as an infant. Some of you know me as the boy who's been on the run this year. A few of you know me as the person who broke into Gringotts last week and left on a dragon." He paused, and there were a few sounds that were almost laughs, which was what he'd been going for. What fewer of you know is what happened in the lower levels of Gringotts during that visit. He told them. Not with the hesitance of someone confessing something unlikely. With the directness of someone reporting a fact. He described Vault 0 and what it contained and the terms of the acknowledgement, and as he spoke he produced the 3 Hallows, the cloak spread across the dais, the stone beside it, the elder wand raised, and the room's response was the response of people in the presence of something they've heard described but never expected to see together. He recited the 7 houses. At each founder's house, he heard sounds from different sections of the room, former Ravenclaw students, former Slytherin students who were visibly complicated about the Slytherin portion of this, people who remembered the founders' houses from their history education and were doing fast legal arithmetic. What this means practically, Harry said, is that I am calling this session under Clause 3 of the Hogwarts Founding Charter, as Lord of the 7 Houses, for the purpose of formally dissolving the illegitimate governance currently occupying the Ministry of Magic, restoring the full Wizengamot to its proper function, and declaring a state of emergency war powers for the purpose of ending Voldemort's occupation of our government and our world. He paused. And then I'm going to vote. On what basis, said a voice from the third row, not hostile, precise. An elderly witch with silver hair and the specific posture of someone who has spent decades in legal chambers. Do you claim House Emrys? The Emrys line has been in abeyance for 13 centuries. Succession law requires recognition by the sitting Master of Death, Harry said. Who is the only entity empowered to seat a new heir to a house in abeyance of this age? He paused. I am the sitting Master of Death. I recognize myself. As is my right under the original founding contract of this institution. The silver-haired witch stared at him for a moment. Then she looked at the 3 Hallows on the dais. Then she sat back. The vote passed. Not unanimously, nothing important ever passes unanimously, but with the kind of clear, decisive majority that ends arguments. 17 people voted against or abstained, and Harry made note of all 17 without animosity. Most of them were frightened rather than hostile. Fear he could work with. He was officially, legally, formally the most politically powerful wizard in Britain. He had this status for about 20 minutes before the wards screamed. Voldemort had sent his response. Not an army, not yet. But 12 Death Eaters materialized at the edge of the Hogwarts grounds, the anti-apparition ward stopping them at the perimeter, and the message arrived simultaneously via dark mark-traced parchment that simply read, "Come out or I come in." Harry took the parchment and read it and handed it to Kingsley. He's not ready for a full assault, Hermione said, reading over Kingsley's shoulder, her voice calm and analytical. This is a probe. He wants to know how many people are here and what we've got. He already knows it's significant, Harry said. He felt the votes. Dark magic registers when legitimate authority shifts, he'd have felt it like something breaking. He paused. He's not afraid yet. But he's noticed. What do we do about the 12 outside? Neville asked. Harry looked at him. Then at Ginny. Then at the room full of 260 people who had just voted to follow him. Nothing today, he said. Let them report back. Let Voldemort know that there was a full, legal, successful session and that it went the way it went. He paused. Let him marinate on that for a bit. You want him rattled, Ron said. I want him rattled, Harry agreed. An angry Voldemort makes mistakes. A scared Voldemort makes bigger ones. He looked at the doors of the Great Hall. And I want the next engagement to be on my terms, not his. Ginny was standing beside him, looking at the message from Voldemort with the expression she wore when she was thinking through something. He'll move within the week, she said. He won't be able to help it. Voldemort doesn't do waiting. I know, Harry said. So what's the plan? Harry looked at her, at Ron, at Hermione, at Neville, at Kingsley, at the full room behind them. He thought about death in a vault beneath the oldest bank in Britain. He thought about 7 names in a circle of amber light. He thought about a scar that no longer hurt. Nagini first, he said. Then everything else falls. Chapter 4, Blood and Binding. Bellatrix Lestrange arrived at Hogwarts at 2 in the morning. Not with an army. Not with the pomp of a formal assault. She came through a gap in the perimeter wards that she'd found by testing them for 6 hours in the dark, patient in the way that genuinely unhinged people can sometimes be patient, not because they've suppressed the madness but because the madness has a direction. She brought 4 Death Eaters with her, which was either confidence or arrogance, and in Bellatrix's case the distinction had never really mattered. Harry felt the breach the moment it happened. He was awake, he'd been awake most of the night, sitting in the window of a 7th-floor classroom with the resurrection stone turning slowly in his fingers, not activating it, just thinking. The warmth in his chest spiked like a compass needle swinging north, and he was on his feet and moving before the conscious part of his brain had fully caught up with the instinctive part. He met Neville in the corridor outside. "I felt it too," Neville said. He had Gryffindor's sword. He'd taken it from Ron's bedside without waking him, which Ron would have opinions about later. 5th floor, East Wing. Near the Charms corridor. "I know," Harry said. "How many?" 5. Bellatrix leading. Neville's jaw set. "Right. Wake Ron and Hermione. Get them to the entrance hall but don't let them come up yet." He paused. "And Neville, get Ginny. You want her in this?" "I want her where I can see her," Harry said, which was not exactly the same thing. He moved fast through the dark corridors, the Elder Wand loose in his hand, the castle adjusting around him in the way it had been doing since the gate had swung open, subtle things, the motion of a portrait, the direction a staircase turned, the quality of the torchlight. Hogwarts had recognized something and was expressing it in the only vocabulary it had, which was architectural. He heard them before he saw them. Bellatrix's voice first, that specific music of hers, low and rich and slightly too pleased about everything, the voice of someone who has been given permission to do the thing they've always wanted to do. Don't know why he thinks a few new titles changes anything. He's still just a boy. Lestrange. A male voice, nervous under the bravado. "We should find the students first, secure, the students aren't why we're here." Her voice moved, and Harry tracked the movement, putting himself at the junction ahead where 2 corridors met in AT. "We're here because the Dark Lord wants proof that this little performance has no teeth." A pause. "And because I want to see the look on Potter's face when Harry walked around the corner. He was about 12 feet from her, the torches between them casting light that moved, and he stopped in the middle of the corridor and looked at Bellatrix Lestrange with the specific attention of someone who has decided how a situation is going to go. She stared at him. The 4 Death Eaters behind her went for their wands immediately, the trained response, the muscle memory of people who had spent years in situations where hesitation was fatal. Harry didn't raise the Elder Wand. He didn't cast anything. He simply looked at the 4 and said, very clearly, very calmly, "Don't." One of them cast a killing curse anyway. Harry sidestepped it. Not dramatically, a single step, measured and precise, the curse passing close enough that the displaced air moved his hair. He still hadn't raised his wand. The Death Eater who had cast it looked at the wall where the curse had hit the stone and left a scorch mark and then looked back at Harry, and something in his face changed in the specific way that faces change when they encounter something that doesn't behave the way it should. "I said don't," Harry repeated, and then he looked at the man who had cast and made a small, unhurried gesture with the Elder Wand, and the man folded as if the skeleton had been temporarily removed from his body and stayed down. "That's not an unforgivable," one of the other 3 said, very carefully. "No," Harry agreed. Bellatrix hadn't moved. She was watching him with her head tilted, her dark eyes doing the calculating thing that she rarely bothered with, the part of her that was genuinely intelligent working alongside the part that was genuinely feral, both of them trying to categorize what they were seeing. "The Elder Wand," she said. "Yes. He'll take it from you." "He's tried," Harry said. Directly and through intermediaries. It hasn't gone well for the intermediaries. He paused. Bellatrix. Tell your people to stand down and we can do this properly. Do what properly? Have the conversation you came here to have. He watched her. You didn't come here to hurt students. You came here because Voldemort needed intelligence and you're the only one he trusts to actually look me in the eye and report back accurately. He paused. So look. And then go back and tell him what you saw. She stared at him for a long, crackling moment. Her wand was in her hand, it was always in her hand, but she hadn't raised it either, and Harry thought he understood why. Not fear. The specific discomfort of someone whose framework for a situation isn't fitting over the situation itself. You don't seem afraid of me, she said. I'm not afraid of you, Harry said. Simple, direct, no performance about it. Everyone is afraid of me. I know. But you're not what I'm afraid of. You haven't been for a while. He held her gaze. Voldemort is what I'm afraid of. The damage he does. The people he takes. Something in his voice that was very steady. You're one of the tools he uses for that damage. Significant tool. But still a tool. The temperature of the corridor changed. Bellatrix's expression moved through something complicated, the calculation snapping off, the feral part surging forward, the specific fury of someone who has just been described with perfect accuracy in a way they find intolerable. She fired 3 spells in rapid sequence, no warning, no preamble. Harry moved through all 3 of them, not blocking, not countering, just not being where they arrived. He'd been a seeker for 6 years and his reflexes had been honed by considerably more dangerous things than Quidditch in the time since, and the Elder Wand was reading his intent before it consciously formed, so the movements were clean in a way that must have looked, from the outside, less like defensive action and more like he simply declined to be hit. The 3 Death Eaters moved in simultaneously from the sides. Harry raised his wand. What followed was fast and not particularly elegant, which was fine. Elegance in combat was a luxury, efficiency was a necessity. He took the 3 of them in order of threat, left to right, 2 with stunning spells and 1 with a binding jinx that wrapped the man in conjured rope before he'd finished raising his wand arm. 9 seconds, 3 targets, no injuries on either side. Bellatrix was the only one left. She looked at her 3 colleagues on the floor and then back at Harry and something new moved through her face, not fear, not defeat, something rawer than either. The look of someone whose world is being reorganized around her in real time, the foundations shifting under certainties she'd held for decades. He said you'd be stronger, she said, almost to herself. Voldemort? He said, after Gringotts, he said the reports from the Ministry break in and then Gringotts indicated you'd become something other than what you were. She was still pointing her wand at him but the certainty behind it had changed. He didn't tell us how much other. What did he tell you? Harry asked. Not interrogating, genuinely curious. That you'd found something in the bank. That it wasn't one of his objects. She paused. He's been in my head for 2 days trying to understand what you found. He can't, she stopped. He can't read you anymore. Your thoughts. He used to be able to feel you. The connection. He told us it's gone. Yes, Harry said. The scar doesn't work anymore. Whatever was connecting us through it, it's quiet now. She stared at him. How? The acknowledgement changed things, Harry said. What was connecting me to him shouldn't have been there. The boundaries are clearer now. He paused. Tell him that. Tell him the connection he's been relying on for 17 years is done. And tell him what you saw tonight. He looked at the 3 men on the floor, at the man still unconscious in the corridor behind them. Tell him I didn't hurt anyone badly. Tell him I didn't need to. Bellatrix looked at him for a long time. Her wand was still up. The complex calculation was still running behind her eyes. "He'll kill me if I go back with this," she said, and the honesty of it was startling, raw and plain in a way that she didn't usually allow. "He'll kill you if you don't," Harry said, equally plain. "That's what he does with people who see things he doesn't want reported." "I know what he does," she said. "Then you know going back isn't the only option." Her eyes narrowed. "You're not suggesting I'm not suggesting anything," Harry said. "I'm pointing out that the thing you've given your whole life to is going to lose. It's going to lose because it was always going to lose, because it's built on fear and fear erodes, and because the person who built it is being taken apart one Horcrux at a time." He paused. "What you do with that information is entirely up to you." She stared at him for what felt like a long time. Then she lowered her wand. Slowly, with the specific deliberateness of someone doing something they're not used to doing. "He has the snake," she said. "Nagini. She doesn't leave his side. He keeps her close because, I know why," Harry said. "The Malfoys," she said. "Narcissa and Draco. They're at the manor. My sister is," she stopped. "She would switch sides if she thought it would save her son. She already has, in her head. She just needs a reason to act on it," Harry said. "Yes. I'll remember that," he said. Bellatrix looked at him one more time. The calculation and the ferule and the decades of absolute certainty about the shape of the world, all of it, written in the set of her face, being renegotiated in real time. "You're nothing like what I thought you were," she said. "I get that a lot lately," Harry said. She turned and walked back down the corridor. She didn't look back. Her footsteps were very quiet on the stone, and then they were gone, and the night settled back into itself, and Harry stood in the corridor with 4 Death Eaters unconscious on the floor around him and felt the situation's full weight in his hands. Ginny arrived from the staircase to his left about 30 seconds later, wand up, Neville right behind her. She took in the corridor, 4 people down, Harry standing unmarked, the absence of Bellatrix, and lowered her wand. "We heard spell fire," she said. "Bit of it," Harry agreed. "You're fine." "Yes." "Bellatrix?" "Left." Ginny studied him for a moment. The same quality she'd had since he arrived, not surprise exactly, but the continuous recalibration of someone who thought they'd understood a person and is finding new dimensions. "You let her leave," she said. "She gave me something useful," Harry said. "And she's more interesting to Voldemort alive and confused than dead and martyred." "What did she give you?" "Narcissa Malfoy," Harry said. "And confirmation that Voldemort can't read me anymore." He bent and began efficiently checking the 4 unconscious Death Eaters, removing wands, and binding them properly. "Help me with these." "Where are we putting them?" Neville asked. "McGonagall's office," Harry said. "Let her decide what to do with them. She'll enjoy that." Neville almost smiled. "She really will." Ron was furious about the sword. Not dramatically furious. Ron had the particular quality of fury that was actually concern wearing an argument's clothes, and the argument about the sword was really an argument about the fact that Harry had gone up to face Bellatrix Lestrange alone at 2 in the morning and hadn't woken anyone. This was delivered at some volume in the corridor outside McGonagall's office while Hermione watched with an expression of quiet resignation, having correctly predicted this conversation. "You could have," Ron started. "I was fine." "That's not, Ron. The point, Ron." Harry looked at him. "I was fine. Genuinely. And I needed you here in case she'd brought more people through a different entry point." "Did she?" "No. But I didn't know that at the time." Ron processed this. His jaw worked. "You could have sent a Patronus. In the time it would have taken to, a Patronus takes 2 seconds." Harry paused. "That's fair," he said. "Yes it is." Ron pointed the sword at him. "Don't do that again." "I'll try. Try harder." Hermione had her arms crossed and the expression that meant she agreed with Ron and was choosing not to say so because she'd rather the point land through Ron saying it than through her endorsing it. Harry recognized the expression because she'd been making it at both of them for 6 years. "There's something else," Harry said, and both of them shifted immediately, the argument packaging itself up and filing itself away for later use, the way it always did when something important entered the conversation. "Bellatrix told me Voldemort can't read me anymore. The connection through my scar is gone." "That's good," Hermione said. "Yes. But it also means he's going to move soon because he's been relying on that connection as an intelligence source and now it's dark." Harry looked at them. "He knows I'm at Hogwarts. He knows the session happened." He felt the authority shift, Bellatrix confirmed that. "And now he's lost his direct line to my head." He paused. "He'll attack within 2 days. Maybe 1. "We're not ready," Ron said. "We're as ready as we're going to be," Harry said. "Which is different. What do we still need?" Hermione asked. "Nagini," Harry said. The name landed in the room with the weight of the thing it represented. Not just a Horcrux, the last one, the one closest to Voldemort, the one that had never been more than a few feet from the man who had fractured his soul to make it. Getting to Nagini meant getting to Voldemort, and getting to Voldemort meant the final engagement, and all three of them were smart enough to understand what that meant. "Bellatrix mentioned the Malfoys," Harry said. "Narcissa especially. She said Narcissa would switch sides to protect Draco." He paused. "Narcissa Malfoy is at the manor. And so is Draco." Ron caught the thread immediately. "You're not actually. Draco knows where Voldemort keeps Nagini when he's at the manor," Harry said. "He lives there. He's been in rooms with both of them. He knows the patterns, the schedules, the places Voldemort feels safe enough to let his guard down." He paused. "And he's not a true believer. He's never been a true believer. He's been terrified and cornered and doing what cornered people do." "Which is survive," Hermione said quietly. "Yes. Harry," Hermione said. "Malfoy Manor. The last time we were there, I know." "Hermione was tortured there," Ron said flatly. "By Bellatrix." "I know," Harry said. He looked at Hermione directly. "I'm not asking either of you to go. I need to go alone for this. In and out, under the cloak, make contact with Draco and Narcissa, get the information, leave." Hermione held his gaze. "The cloak functions at full capacity now." "I tested it this morning," Harry said. "I put it on and walked past every detection ward I could find in the castle. Including the Carrow's monitoring spells, which are nasty. Nothing registered. Not a flicker." She thought about this. "How long?" 3 hours, Harry said. "I'm back in 3 hours or you come looking." He paused. "But I'll be back in 3. If Voldemort is there, I'll see him before he sees me and I'll leave without making contact." Harry paused. "The point is the information. Not the confrontation." "Not yet." Ron and Hermione looked at each other, the exchange of a year's worth of shared experience compressed into 3 seconds. 3 hours, Ron said. "Not 3 hours and 1 minute. Harry pulled the cloak from his pocket. Malfoy Manor at 3 in the morning had the quality of something very large and very old pretending to be asleep. The grounds were patrolled. Harry counted 4 Death Eaters in the first 10 minutes, moving in overlapping patterns that were professional enough to suggest someone had drilled them, but the cloak was doing what Death had promised it would do. He walked past 2 of the patrols close enough to hear their breathing and neither of them registered anything. Not a twitch. Not a pause. He went in through a ground floor window that was warded but not sealed, an oversight, or a concession to the family's need to access the garden, or both. The ward slid over the cloak like water over glass. The interior of the manor was cold in the way that places become cold when they've been occupied by fear for long enough that the temperature has accepted it as a permanent condition. Harry moved through the ground floor, learning the layout, listening. No sounds of Voldemort, no sense of him either, which was notable. In the past, Harry had been able to feel when Voldemort was close, the particular pressure of the connection activating. Nothing now. Clean absence. He found Draco on the second floor, in a room that had clearly been a study and had been converted into something closer to a cell, unlocked, because you didn't need locks when the whole estate was a prison, sitting at a desk with a book open in front of him that he wasn't reading. Harry let the cloak fall. Draco spun out of his chair with his wand up and a curse halfway to his lips before his eyes resolved what they were seeing and everything in him stopped. The silence lasted about 4 seconds. "Potter," Draco said. "Malfoy," Harry said. Draco looked at the Elder Wand in Harry's hand. His eyes moved to the scar on Harry's forehead, to his face, to the quality that Hermione had described as different and that Harry still couldn't fully see from the inside. Something passed through Draco's expression that was complicated and fast, fear, yes, but underneath it something that had been living under the fear for a long time, something like exhaustion. "How are you here?" Draco said. Harry gestured with the cloak. Draco's eyes moved to it. "The Deathly Hallows are real," he said, not quite as a question. "Yes." "And you have, all three," Harry said. "Yes." Draco set his wand down on the desk. Slowly, carefully, in the manner of someone making a deliberate and considered choice about the message they're sending. "He's not here tonight," he said. "He left yesterday evening. He hasn't been here consistently since," he paused. "Since whatever you did at Gringotts. Where does he go when he's not here?" "Different places. None do, there's a property in the north. Sometimes the Riddle House, though less recently." Draco paused. "He keeps Nagini with him." "Always." "Always," Harry confirmed. "If he's sleeping," Draco paused again, and something in his jaw tightened, the cost of what he was doing evident on his face. "If he's sleeping, he sleeps with her at the foot of the bed. She doesn't leave the room he's in." He met Harry's eyes. "She's the last one, isn't she?" "The last," he stopped. "Yes," Harry said. Draco was quiet for a moment. "You're going to kill him?" "Yes. And you need to know where he is." "I need to know his patterns," Harry said. "His habits. The places he lets his guard down. Specifically, I need to know if there's ever a time when Nagini is present and he isn't." He paused. "Or a time when he's vulnerable enough that reaching the snake is possible." Draco sat down on the edge of the desk. He looked like someone carrying a weight that had gotten very gradually heavier over a very long time. "He takes the pensive out," he said. "When he thinks he's alone. I've seen him through a gap in the door twice. He looks at memories." He paused. "Nagini is in the room when he does this. But he's not present in those moments. Not the way he normally is. He's in the memory." "Pensive immersion," Harry said. "How long does he stay in?" 20 minutes, maybe. The times I saw." Draco looked at him. "It's the Horcrux memories, I think. The things he made. He goes back and looks at them, I don't know why. Some kind of anchor, maybe. Something to," he stopped. "To confirm they still exist," Harry said slowly. "Or to confirm that he's still himself." He thought about this. A man who has split his soul 7 times, going back to look at the pieces he scattered. Not out of sentimentality. Out of the compulsive need to verify that the fragments are still there, still intact, still keeping him tethered to existence. Except they weren't, anymore. 5 of them were gone. "He doesn't know yet," Draco said. "About the Horcruxes. Or he didn't when he left." He knows something is wrong, he can feel it, I think, some kind of damage, but he hasn't confirmed what. He looked up. When he finds out how many, he'll panic, Harry said. Yes. It won't look like panic, Draco said. It'll look like the opposite of panic. It'll look like very deliberate, very violent action. He paused. He'll attack Hogwarts. Properly. Not probes. I know. You have a plan for that. Yes. Draco looked at him for a long, careful moment. My mother, he said. Bellatrix told you about my mother. Yes. She wants, he stopped, and the effort of saying it clearly was visible. She would help you if she could. She's been trying to find a way to protect me that doesn't involve staying here. But there's nowhere to go where, he stopped again. There is now, Harry said. Hogwarts. The Great Hall is being used as a staging ground and the castle is protected and there are Order members there. Your mother can come. So can you. Draco's expression did something complicated. You're offering me, I'm telling you there's a place that's safe, Harry said. What you do with that is your choice. He paused. But your Aunt Bellatrix came to Hogwarts last night and 4 Death Eaters are currently in Professor McGonagall's care and Bellatrix went home because she looked at what I showed her and did her own arithmetic. Your mother is at least as smart as Bellatrix. Smarter, Draco said, with the automatic precision of someone stating a fact. Tell her, Harry said. If she wants to come, she comes. If you want to come, you come. He picked up the cloak. But do it before the main assault. Once Voldemort moves on Hogwarts, travel becomes considerably more complicated. Draco was quiet for a moment. Potter. Harry stopped. At Malfoy Manor, Draco said. When we had you here. I didn't, he stopped. I said I didn't know if it was you. I know, Harry said. I remember. I knew, Draco said. I knew it was you. Harry looked at him. The two of them had 6 years of history that was half genuine conflict and half the collision of two people who might, under different circumstances and different sorting, have understood each other. It wasn't comfortable history. But it was honest, which was something. I know that too, Harry said. He left the way he'd come. In the corridor outside Draco's room, he paused for a moment and closed his eyes and extended the thing that had settled in his chest since Vault Zero, the awareness that ran underneath ordinary awareness, reading the estate. In a room on the 3rd floor, Narcissa Malfoy was awake and sitting in a chair by a window, looking at the grounds in a way that people look at things when they're not really seeing them. Harry stood outside her door for a moment and thought about what Bellatrix had said. She would switch sides if she thought it would save her son. And then he thought about a forest, and a woman kneeling over him in the dark, and a whispered question, is Draco alive? He knocked. The sound of it, a knock on a door, in a Death Eater's household at 3 in the morning, should have produced alarm. Instead there was a pause, and then the sound of footsteps, and the door opened, and Narcissa Malfoy looked at Harry Potter and was, visibly, utterly unsurprised. I wondered, she said quietly, when you'd come. Your sister told you, Harry said. My sister told me enough, she said. She stepped back from the door, the invitation clear. Harry went in. The room was well kept and cold, and Narcissa stood near the window with the self-possession of a woman who has been navigating a dangerous situation with insufficient resources for a very long time and has developed a particular kind of grace as a result. Draco, she said. Unharmed. Talking to me, or he was when I left. Harry looked at her. You already knew he would. I suspected, she said. When Bella came back last night and said, she paused. She told me more than she intended to. She was unsettled. Bella hasn't been unsettled in 20 years. I offered her a way out, Harry said. She didn't take it. She won't, Narcissa said, without heat. She believes too completely. Even now, with everything. She paused. I don't. I haven't for a long time. She looked at him directly. What do you want from me? I want you to come to Hogwarts, Harry said. You and Draco. Before the final battle. And in exchange? Nothing, Harry said. You go under order protection. Draco gets fair treatment when the legal proceedings happen. That's it. Narcissa studied him. You're the Lord of the Seven Houses now, she said. Bella's message was colorful, but that much was clear. You have enough authority to grant protection and have it mean something. Yes. And the war, she said. You'll win it. Not a question. Harry noted that. Yes, he said. She turned back to the window for a moment. Then, the pensive in the East study, she said. The Dark Lord uses it on the nights he stays here. He locks the room, but the lock is standard. Nagini is with him. She feeds in that room, which is irregular. He doesn't like it observed. She paused. He'll be back here the night after tomorrow. He comes here when he's preparing something significant. Because it feels safe, Harry said. Because he controls it completely, she said. Or believes he does. She looked at him. He'll be in the East study sometime after midnight. Harry looked at her for a moment. Why are you telling me this? Because I was in a forest, she said simply, and I made a choice, and it led here, and here is a room with the Master of Death and a chance to end this without my son spending 20 years in Azkaban. She paused. And because I'm very tired. He left the manor as he'd come in, under the cloak, through the ground floor window, past the patrols who saw nothing. He was back at Hogwarts in just under 3 hours. Ron and Hermione were in the entrance hall waiting. Well? Ron said. 2 days, Harry said. We're going to Malfoy Manor in 2 days. We are? Ron said. Not all of us, Harry said. Me, you, and Hermione. In and out. The cloak, the sword, the basilisk fang. He paused. I know when Nagini is going to be accessible. I know when Voldemort is going to be distracted. He looked at both of them. One chance. Clean. And after Nagini, Hermione said. After Nagini, Harry said, there are no more Horcruxes. They both went very quiet. The full significance of that, the thing they'd been working toward for a year, that had defined the shape of every day since they'd left Hogwarts in September, settling over the room like weather. There's still the peace in you, Hermione said carefully. Yes, Harry said. We'll deal with that here. Before the final battle. He looked at her. I have a theory about how. Tell me. The resurrection stone, he said. Not to call anyone back. He paused, working through it. Death told me the stone in the hands of the true Master of Death functions differently than it does in other hands. Cadmus used it to call back the dead because that's what he wanted. But the stone's actual function is boundary work. The line between living and dead. With enough conscious control, I think I can use it to locate the fragment in me and draw it out. Separate it from the part of me that's actually alive. Hermione was very quiet for a moment. That's not documented anywhere. I know. There's no precedent, I know. Harry, Hermione, he said. Everything we've done this year is undocumented. We broke into Gringotts and left on a dragon. I was acknowledged by an entity that most people think is a metaphor. He paused. The absence of precedent doesn't mean impossible. It means first. She held his gaze. Then, slowly, she nodded. Walk me through the theory. All of it. Every step. So he did. They sat in the great hall, at a table by the window, while the school slept around them, and Harry laid out the theory in full and Hermione pulled it apart and rebuilt it and found the flaws and they worked through the flaws, her quill moving across parchment at the speed of genuine intellectual engagement, the scratch of it very loud in the quiet room. Ron sat across from them and contributed at the right moments and was silent at the right moments, which was its own kind of skill. Around 4 in the morning, Hermione set down her quill. "It could work," she said. "The boundary function of the stone, the master's authority over the boundary, yes. Theoretically, there's a mechanism there." She paused. "But you'd need to be in a particular state to do it. Completely still. No defensive instincts running. You'd need to be fully present in the working, which means if something went wrong, you'd be there," Harry said. "I would." "You and Ron," Harry said. "That's enough." Ron nodded. "Simply, without drama. The day we go to the manor for Nagini," Harry said. "We do the stone working when we come back. Before Voldemort attacks." He paused. "If I can separate the soul fragment cleanly, it doesn't just remove a Horcrux. It breaks the last line of connection between us. He loses any remaining ability to track me, feel me, know where I am." He paused. "And it means when we finally face each other, I'm fighting him clean. No piece of him inside me. No tether." "Just you," Hermione said. "Just me," Harry said. "And the Hallows. And 7 houses. And whatever else I've managed to accumulate." He almost smiled. "Should be enough." Dawn was starting to gray the windows of the Great Hall. Outside, Hogwarts was becoming visible, the grounds, the lake, the dark outline of the forest. The castle was breathing, which was how it always felt in the early morning, the ancient stone cycling through something that was almost like sleep. Ginny came in with 2 cups of tea at the precise moment Harry stopped talking, which was either excellent timing or the kind of sixth sense she'd always had about him. She set 1 cup in front of Harry and 1 in front of Hermione and looked at both of them and the covered parchment between them and made her assessment. "How close?" she said. "Close," Harry said. She sat down beside him. Her shoulder against his shoulder. Her hand, briefly, finding his under the table. He held it. "Tell me the plan," she said. He told her. She listened the way she'd always listened, with the full, engaged attention of someone who is thinking forward through every scenario simultaneously, her brow slightly furrowed, her tea going cold. When he finished she was quiet for a moment. "The manor," she said. "I'm coming." "Ginny, I'm coming," she said again, and the tone was the tone that meant the conversation about whether she was coming was over. "You need 3 people to cover the retreat if something goes wrong. I'm the 4th wand. I stay outside on extraction watch." Harry looked at her. "Don't," she said. "Don't what?" "Whatever look that is," she said. "The one you do when you're thinking about protecting me from something by keeping me out of it." "That's not, Harry." He paused. "You're right," he said. "Extraction watch." She picked up her tea. "Good." Ron looked at Hermione. Hermione looked at Ron. "For then," Ron said. "For," Hermione agreed. Outside the great hall windows, the sky was turning from gray to a pale, clear blue. Harry drank his tea and watched it and felt the shape of the coming days with the clarity of something already in motion, the pieces moving, the pattern resolving, the enormous machine of it all turning inevitably toward the place where one way or another everything was going to arrive. 2 days. Nagini first. Then everything else. Chapter 5. What Death Promised. The east study of Malfoy Manor had one window that faced the formal garden, and the garden had a sundial in it that Narcissa Malfoy had positioned to catch the moonlight in a specific way so that it cast a pale strip of light across the study's floor from midnight until roughly 2 in the morning. Harry knew this because Narcissa had told Draco and Draco had told the mirror in his room, and the mirror had relayed it through a chain of enchanted objects that Hermione had set up with methodical thoroughness. The communication chain was inelegant and involved 3 enchanted mirrors, a self-writing quill, and creature doing something at one end that he declined to explain, but it worked. The strip of moonlight, Narcissa had specified, fell directly across the base of the armchair the Dark Lord favored when he used the pensieve. Nagini habitually coiled at the foot of it. Harry stood in the darkness of the manor grounds and turned this information over in his mind one more time, confirming the picture was complete. "You're doing the thing," Ginny said beside him. She was invisible under her own disillusionment charm, her voice coming from a point about 2 feet to his left. "What thing?" "The thing where you go very still and your eyes go somewhere else and you're running through the plan for the 40th time. I've only run through it 37 times, Harry said. The soft sound she made was not quite a laugh but occupied the same territory. "We're good," she said. "Go." Ron and Hermione were already at the ground floor window. Hermione had the lock charm dissolved in about 4 seconds, and Ron went through first with Gryffindor's sword over his shoulder and his wand in his hand, moving with the specific economic quietness of someone who had been operating in hostile territory for months and had stopped being frightened of it and started being good at it. Harry pulled the cloak on. The manor swallowed them. It was different from 2 nights ago, charged in some way, the air inside carrying that particular thickness of a place where powerful magic has been very recently active. Something had happened here today. Harry filed it under relevant and moved forward. The ground floor was empty. First floor, a single Death Eater in the main corridor, sitting in a chair with the boneless posture of someone halfway to sleep. Ron and Hermione flattened into a doorway. Harry walked past the Death Eater close enough to feel the warmth coming off him, and the man didn't so much as twitch. Second floor landing. Third floor corridor. East wing. The East Study's door was locked, properly this time, with something layered and deliberate. Harry felt the architecture of it without touching it, the Elder Wand reading the ward construction the way a musician reads notation. 3 layers. The outer one was standard, the middle one dark and specific, the innermost one something very old indeed. He addressed the innermost one first, which was counterintuitive and exactly right. The middle layer collapsed without its foundation. The outer layer he dismissed with a breath. The door swung inward. The room was dim, lit by a single low fire, and the pensieve sat on a table in the center of it, a wide shallow basin of extraordinary age, the stone of it carved with figures that moved subtly in the firelight. The armchair was to the right of it, high-backed and dark, and at the foot of the armchair Nagini was coiled. She was enormous. Harry had known she was large, had seen her, had fought her in visions, had heard Parseltongue in his sleep for years, but knowing and seeing were different things. 15 feet of muscle and scale and ancient enchantment, her head resting on the armchair's footrest, her eyes closed in the thin not-quite sleep of a snake that is always very lightly awake. The pensieve was active. Its surface moved with the swirling, mercury-like restlessness of something in use, and the chair was empty, which meant Voldemort was inside it, inside a memory, his consciousness submerged, the armchair holding only a body that was breathing with the shallow, barely there rhythm of deep pensive immersion. Harry stood very still. Nagini's tongue flickered. She tasted the air, and the air gave her nothing because the cloak gave nothing, and her eyes didn't open. But her head moved, the smallest fraction, a reorientation, some instinct older than magical training responding to the presence of something it couldn't categorize. Harry crouched. He looked at the snake across 4 feet of floor and spoke in Parseltongue, not loudly, barely above the level of breath, the language arriving without effort, the way it always had since the Chamber of Secrets, the way it always would. "Be still," he said. Nagini's head lifted fractionally. "I am not here to harm you," Harry said. "You are a vessel for something that shouldn't be there. What I take tonight is not you." The snake regarded him with one amber eye, the pupil a perfect vertical line. Then she lowered her head back to the footrest. Harry looked at Ron in the doorway, Ron who had his wand trained on the snake with an expression of absolute concentrated focus. Harry shook his head slightly. Ron held but didn't lower his wand. Hermione was at the pensieve, reading its surface, her expression doing the rapid assessment thing. She held up 2 fingers. 20 minutes was Draco's estimate. Maybe less, the pensieve's activity suggested he'd been in for a while. Hermione held up 1 finger. Call it 10. Harry produced the basilisk fang. He looked at Nagini. The soul fragment inside her was distinct now, he could feel the shape of it in a way that the acknowledgement had sharpened to something almost visual, a wrongness in the snake's magical signature, something caught in there that had no right to be. The snake herself was alive and present and the fang was going to kill her too, and he held that fact plainly without sentiment and without indifference. She was a living creature who had been made into a weapon and a vessel and had had no choice in any of it. "I'm sorry," he said in Parseltongue. He drove the fang through the coil of her body above the head where the neck met the skull and the basilisk venom did what basilisk venom did, which was immediate and total, and Nagini convulsed once, a violent full-body movement that made Ron lurch forward, and then went still. The soul fragment screamed. It didn't die the way the others had. It fought. It tore at the room, at the air, at the edges of the magical field. A Horcrux that had been living inside a sentient creature for years had more to it than the ones hidden in objects, more purchase, more presence. The pensieve surface went wild, the mercury surface splashing upward. The fire in the grate flared and died. And the armchair moved. Voldemort surfaced from the pensieve. Not with the slow reorientation of someone coming up from immersion, with the abrupt, violent return of someone who has felt their anchor to existence tear. He was out of the chair before Harry had fully registered the movement, white and terrible in the low light, his wand in his hand, and his eyes, his red eyes, landed on the snake. On Nagini's still form. On the fang still embedded in her body. The sound he made was not a scream. It was something below a scream, something that bypassed the throat and came from somewhere deeper and more foundational, and the magic in the room responded to it like weather responding to pressure. Everything that wasn't fixed to the walls or floor lifted and shifted and broke. Harry dropped the cloak. Voldemort's eyes moved from the snake to Harry, and the look in them was not the cold calculation Harry had seen in the graveyard, not the controlled fury of their encounters at the Ministry. This was something rawer. Something that had been underneath all the architecture of Voldemort's terrible composure, visible now because the architecture had cracked. 6, Harry said. Not triumphantly. Just clearly. 6 of 7. Voldemort cast without a word and Harry moved, ducking the first curse, the second, deflecting the third with a shield that he threw up not with the Elder Wand but with his free hand, which was new and which clearly registered with Voldemort because the red eyes recalibrated mid-cast. Potter, Voldemort said, and the name was a specific kind of pressure. You've been busy. People keep saying that, Harry said. What have they done to you, Voldemort said, and it wasn't a question. It was an assessment, slow and cold, the man running his legitimacy against Harry's surface and finding nothing, not resistance, not a clemency, just the smooth, complete blankness of a mind that has been reorganized around a principle he'd never encountered and couldn't parse. Death acknowledged me, Harry said. The actual entity. In a vault under Gringotts. He held the Elder Wand at his side. You've been afraid of death your whole life. I'm carrying it. Voldemort moved, fluid and fast, no warning, firing 3 unforgivables in a sequence designed to cut off any direction of movement. Harry stepped through the gaps between them with the unhurried precision of someone who has had 7 months and the guidance of death itself to develop his instincts, and the 3 curses hit the walls and the study became considerably less intact. Draco, Voldemort said suddenly, his voice shifting, no longer speaking to Harry. Draco, come, he's not here, Harry said. He left an hour ago. His mother too. He paused. Narcissa walked out of this house with your most loyal general's nephew and your best political hostage, and she did it because the only thing she's ever genuinely cared about is her son, and her son made a choice. He watched Voldemort's face. The Malfoys are done. Something moved in Voldemort's expression that was not anger. It was something lonelier than anger. You have nothing here, Harry said. You came back tonight to look at the memories of what you made, didn't you? The Horcruxes. You keep checking them. He paused. How many did you know were gone before tonight? Voldemort looked at him with those terrible eyes and said nothing. 3. Harry said. 4. You've been feeling it, the damage. Every one we destroyed left a mark on whatever counts as your soul. He paused. Now there are 6. Nagini was the last object. What's left? He let the question sit there. He watched Voldemort do the arithmetic he'd been avoiding. The moment it arrived, the moment Voldemort's calculation reached the only remaining variable and landed on it, was visible on the most feared face in a generation. Not as panic. Not as breakdown. As a very still, very cold, very specific kind of attention. You, Voldemort said softly. The night you killed my parents, Harry said. Your soul was so unstable by then, 7 pieces, riddle, you'd split it 6 times already, that when the killing curse rebounded, the fragment of soul you'd been carrying was torn loose and it attached to me. I've been carrying a piece of you since I was 15 months old. He paused. I didn't know. Dumbledore didn't tell me. He knew, Voldemort said. Yes. He built his whole plan around it. Harry paused. His plan required me to die. Something moved in Voldemort's expression. Something that was not a smile but occupied the same architectural space as one. But you're not going to die. No, Harry said. I'm not. The plan fails, Voldemort said, and there was something almost like pleasure in it, the deep, instinctive satisfaction of someone who has spent years trying to dismantle Dumbledore's work finding that it has dismantled itself. The Horcrux in you, if you don't die, it survives. I survive. That's the theory Dumbledore was working with, Harry said. Yes. Then you can't destroy me, Voldemort said. Not without destroying yourself. Dumbledore couldn't find a way around that, Harry said. He was working without some important information. He raised the resurrection stone in his free hand. I have different tools. Voldemort stared at the stone. Then at the Elder Wand. Then at Harry's face, and Harry could feel the legitimacy pressing against him, the full force of Voldemort's mind, which was extraordinary, which had always been extraordinary, and finding nothing. Like pressing against a mirror. Even if you remove the soul fragment, Voldemort said, you still have to face me. I know, Harry said. I'm looking forward to it. Voldemort fired another curse and Harry was already gone, the cloak back on in one fluid motion, the room suddenly containing no visible Harry Potter and one extremely alarmed Dark Lord. Harry was at the window. Hogwarts, he said, pulling it open. 2 days. Come if you want to finish this. He went through the window. Behind him, in the east study of Malfoy Manor, the sound of Voldemort's fury followed him out into the dark garden like weather, like something geological, like the sound of a world ending at the edges. Harry landed on the gravel path below, the cloak still on, and ran. Ginny met him at the perimeter. I heard the magic from out here, she said. She was running beside him before he'd fully processed she was there. How close? Very, Harry said. He surfaced from the pensieve. He knows about the Horcruxes. All of them. He knows Nagini is gone. He did the arithmetic on the rest. Harry didn't slow down. Behind them, the manor was lighting up, windows blazing, voices, the sound of apparition cracks as whatever Death Eaters were in residence responded to the summons. He knows there's only one left. Where are Ron and Hermione? Perimeter east, here, Ron said, appearing from the tree lean at a run, Hermione beside him, both of them moving with the efficient urgency of people who heard the manor go active and made the correct assessment. What happened? We heard, moving, Harry said. Talk when we're out. They disapparated from the tree line together, the four of them, the manor's wards trying to clamp down a half-second too late, and the world compressed and then expanded and they were on the road outside Hogsmeade and the night air was cold and sharp and clean. For a moment all four of them just breathed. He knows, Hermione said. Yes. He's coming tomorrow, she said. Not a question. Tonight, maybe, Harry said. If he can get organized fast enough. He looked at the path to Hogwarts, the distant shape of the castle against the dark sky. We need to get everyone ready. Harry. Hermione's voice had the quality it got when she'd been sitting on something important and had just decided the time for sitting on it was over. The soul fragment. You said we'd do the stone working before the final battle. Yes. We need to do it now, she said. Not tomorrow. Not before the attack. Now, before he gets here, while we still have the time to do it properly. He looked at her. She was right and he knew it, and the shape of his own reluctance about it was visible to him, not fear exactly, but the recognition that the stone working was the thing he understood least, the most theoretical piece, the step in the plan built on logic rather than experience. How do we do it? Ron asked. His voice was steady. The room of requirement, Hermione said. It can become whatever we need. We need a quiet space, a contained magical environment, and time. She paused. And I need 15 minutes to prepare. Do it, Harry said. They moved fast through the castle, which was partially awake. Word traveled in Hogwarts the way it always had, through the portraits, through the enchanted staircases, through whatever quality of ancient awareness the building maintained. People were up. Neville was in the 7th floor corridor when they arrived, which meant the castle had told him, and Ginny said something to him in a low voice that Harry didn't hear, and Neville nodded and turned to managing the corridor, giving them the space. The room of requirement became what Hermione needed. She paced in front of it with the specific focused energy of someone designing rather than requesting, and the door that appeared was plain and the room behind it was simple, stone, warm, a low fire, a circle on the floor marked in silver that she'd thought about because she'd been thinking about this working for 3 days. In the center, she said to Harry. He sat down in the center of the silver circle, cross-legged, the stone in his right hand and the Elder Wand laid across his knees. Hermione crouched in front of him. This is boundary work, she said. What you described, the stone as an instrument of separation rather than summoning. You're not calling anyone. You're identifying the fragment by its nature, it belongs to the dead, it's a piece of a soul that should be dead, the boundary between your living self and it is something the stone can locate and the Master's authority can enforce. Yes, Harry said. If it works, the fragment separates. It has nowhere to go, it won't go to Voldemort because the other 6 are gone and there's no longer enough of him to reconstitute. It just disperses, Harry said. Yes. She paused. And if it doesn't work? We try something else, Harry said. She held his gaze. All right. She stood and moved to the edge of the circle. Ron was on the other side, sword in hand for reasons that were more psychological than tactical, and Ginny was at the door and the room was sealed and the fire was low and steady. Harry looked at the stone. He'd thought about this more than he'd admitted. The stone had destroyed Dumbledore, had hijacked him, bypassing all of that extraordinary will and intelligence to feed on the grief underneath. It had undone the most powerful wizard Harry had ever known by going straight to the thing he loved and missed most. Harry knew what he loved and missed most. He held the stone and he let himself think about Sirius. Not defensively, not with the practiced acclimacy of someone trying not to feel things too much, fully. The way Sirius had laughed, which was the most alive sound Harry had ever heard. The way he'd looked in that photograph, young and uncomplicated and unbroken. The way he'd looked across the veil in Harry's memory, which was the last time Harry had seen his face. The stone warmed. Harry felt the pull of it, the enormous, gravitational pull of the thing the stone was offering, the almost connection with someone who had been loved and was gone. He sat with the pull and didn't follow it. Let it exist without acting on it. I know you're there, he thought, not aloud. I'm not calling you back. That's not what this is. The warmth in the stone merged with the warmth in his chest, the acknowledgement warmth, and the two things, the boundary instrument and the boundary authority, found each other in his hands and aligned. Harry turned his attention inward. He'd been in his own mind before, in the occlumency sessions with Snape, in the forced invasions of Voldemort's legilimency, in the mirror-clear stillness of his own dreams. This was different from all of those. This was not observation from outside or defense against intrusion, this was the Master of Death's authority moving through the boundary between himself and the fragment that didn't belong there, identifying it by the quality of its wrongness, by the fact that it was dead in a living body, by the fundamental category error of its existence. He found it. It was small. Smaller than he'd imagined, not a presence but almost an absence, a place where the living energy that ran through him had a gap, like a missing stitch in fabric. Cold where everything else was warm. Old fear, old cruelty, old desperate grasping at continued existence. A piece of a man who had been so afraid to die that he had made himself into something that could barely be called alive. Harry felt something that was not quite pity. Something in the vicinity of pity but colder and clearer. Out, he said to it, internally, with the authority of someone who holds the boundary between what it was and what it wanted to be. You don't belong here. You never did. The fragment resisted. It had been there for 17 years. It had shaped him in ways he'd never fully disentangle, the Parseltongue, the instinct for survival, the specific qualities of his mind that mapped, occasionally, onto Voldemort's. It had been there so long it had integrated. Pulling it free was not like pulling something out. It was like separating two things that had grown together. Harry held steady. He pushed nothing. He simply maintained the authority, the clear, unmoving statement of the boundary between this piece of dead soul and his own living one, the distinction enforced by the thing he was carrying, the acknowledgement that had reorganized every piece of magical reality in him. The stone in his hand was warm. The Elder Wand was warm. The fragment had no counter to something that operated at the level of the principle that organized it. It came free. Slowly. The way something stuck comes free, with the last resistance and then suddenly all at once. Harry felt it like a clearing, like a breath after a room that had been slightly too warm for a very long time, like the specific sensation of putting down something heavy and finding you'd forgotten how to stand without the weight. In the room, the fire flared once. Hermione made a sound. Harry opened his eyes. The silver circle on the floor had darkened, the inscribed lines gone ashy, and where the fragment had gone there was a brief, barely there, barely visible, dark shape in the air above the circle that dispersed so fast he couldn't say he'd fully seen it. Gone. Ron exhaled very slowly. Did it? Yes, Harry said. How do you feel? Hermione asked. She was kneeling at the edge of the circle with both hands pressed to the floor, reading the magical residue the way she read everything. Her voice was controlled but her eyes weren't. Harry took stock. He'd expected the absence to feel like something had been taken. It didn't. It felt like something had been returned, some quality of self that had been partially occupied returning to full presence. Like a house that had always had a stranger in the attic finding the attic finally empty. Clear, he said. The legilimency connection with Voldemort? Harry checked. Nothing. Not the suppressed silence that had followed the acknowledgement but the true absence of something that had never been properly there to begin with. Gone, he said. Hermione sat back and let out a breath that she'd clearly been holding for some time. Ron crossed the room in 3 steps and hauled Harry to his feet and gripped both his shoulders in the way that people grip each other when the alternative is doing something considerably more embarrassing, and Harry gripped back, and that was sufficient. Ginny, at the door, was very still. Harry looked at her over Ron's shoulder. She looked at him the way you look at someone you've been afraid for, who is now standing in front of you whole, and finding the transition from fear to relief almost harder than the fear itself. He crossed the room to her. She put her hand on his face briefly, checking, and he let her. 7, she said quietly. 7, he said. All of them. All of them. He paused. Voldemort is mortal now. He doesn't know it yet. Or he suspects but hasn't confirmed. He'll come to confirm it, she said. Yes. And you'll be ready. Yes. She dropped her hand. Then let's get ready. What followed was the most organized 12 hours Harry had ever been part of. Kingsley had been coordinating through the night, and when dawn came and Harry and the others came down from the 7th floor, the castle was in a state of controlled, professional preparation that McGonagall had overseen with the focused intensity of someone who has been waiting to do exactly this for a very long time. Students who were of age and chose to fight were being organized by Neville, who had a natural gift for this that no one had entirely anticipated. Students who were not of age were being moved through the Hog's Head passage to Aberforth's care, which was not elegant but was effective. The order had arrived in force overnight. Harry moved through the Great Hall counting faces, Kingsley, Tonks, Lupin, who looked at Harry with an expression that was warm and slightly awed and deeply parental, Arthur and Molly Weasley, whose greeting to Harry involved Molly crushing all available oxygen out of the immediate area, various Aurors whose names he was learning, various Order members he'd known since the beginning. Narcissa and Draco Malfoy were in a side room off the Great Hall. Draco was sitting very straight with the expression of someone waiting for judgment. Narcissa was standing with the composure of someone who has made an irrevocable choice and has decided to inhabit it completely. Harry stopped in the doorway. Draco. Draco looked up. The East Study, Harry said. When we came in, the Pensieves' activity suggested he'd been in there for longer than the standard session. Do you know what memory he was in? Draco thought about this. There were times this month when he'd come out of the study looking wrong. Worse than normal. I think he was going back to the making of the first one. The Horcrux. The diary. He paused. I think he was going back because it was the first time the soul held after splitting. He was checking whether the damage could be undone. It can't, Harry said. I know, Draco said. I don't think it can be undone even if all the fragments were reconstituted, which they can't be now. You can't, he paused. You can't put something back that way. Can you? No, Harry said. What he did to himself is permanent. Even if every Horcrux survived, the soul that made them is already, he paused, thinking about how to say it. It's already too fractured to function as a soul. Draco absorbed this quietly. So when you face him, he's mortal, Harry said. Completely. For the first time since 1943. Something crossed Draco's face that was complicated. He'd grown up with Voldemort as the organizing fact of his world, the force that justified everything his family had done, the invincible constant that made loyalty to him both compulsory and rational. Hearing that force described as mortal, vulnerable, finite, in plain language, the reorganization of that was visible in real time. What do you need from me? Draco said. Stay with your mother, Harry said. When the fighting starts, stay out of it. Not because you're not capable. Because I need to know where you are and that you're safe when this ends. He paused. The legal proceedings afterward are going to require testimony. Yours and your mother's. That's more valuable to me than another wand in the battle. Draco looked at him with those gray eyes that had always calculated and were calculating now. You're protecting us. I'm being strategic, Harry said. which amounts to the same thing. He left them and went back to the Great Hall. Snape was there. Standing with McGonagall, both of them bent over a map of the grounds, and the sight of them together, the woman who had hated and grieved Dumbledore's death and the man who had committed it, was strange in the way that only things which have been reorganized around a new truth can be strange. McGonagall looked up when Harry approached. Her expression communicated that she'd had a conversation with Snape that had been either very difficult or very clarifying or both. The north and east perimeters, Snape said without preamble, pointing to the map. The wards on the north boundary were weakened during the Death Eater patrol activity of the past 2 months. If he brings enough people and concentrates the assault, the west then, Harry said. We put the strongest fighters on the west approach and let the north draw initial attention. McGonagall, statues, McGonagall said, which was not what Harry had expected her to say and also was absolutely what he should have expected her to say. The castle's enchanted armor and statuary will respond to my direct command. They won't win a battle but they create chaos and chaos, slows an advance, Harry finished. Yes. Good. He looked at the map. Snape, Alecto and Amicus, Snape said. They're currently in the dungeons under the impression that I have a task for them. They won't be participating in this battle. Good, Harry said. He paused. Where will you be? Something in Snape's face, not quite uncertainty, more like a man locating himself on a new map. Where I'm most useful, he said. The students, Harry said. The ones who stayed to fight. Neville's people. They know their magic and they know this school and they need an adult who can direct them effectively. That's you. Snape looked at him for a moment. You're putting me with the students. I'm putting you with the most important fighters we have, Harry said. Who happen to be students. He paused. They also need someone who survived 3 decades in Voldemort's inner circle and knows how Death Eaters actually fight. That's also you. McGonagall made a sound that was not quite a laugh. Snape looked at Harry the way he'd been looking at him since the conversation in the headmaster's office, the look of a man who has been operating inside a framework for decades and is finding that the framework has been rebuilt around him without his noticing. Very well, he said. Luna arrived through the Hog's Head passage at mid-morning. She was thinner than Harry remembered, and her hair was longer, and she had the specific quality that people who have been imprisoned sometimes develop, a sort of deliberate spaciousness in her movements, as if she is appreciating the room. But her eyes were the same, and when she saw Harry she smiled with the complete uncomplicated warmth of someone for whom the present moment is always sufficient. I knew you'd be here, she said. Were you? Harry started, and then decided on honesty. Are you all right? Malfoy Manor, it wasn't pleasant, she said, with the same tone she'd used to observe that it wasn't pleasant weather. But I learned a great deal about dirigible plums from a house elf called Dobby. She stopped. Oh. Dobby. He saved us, Harry said. He was very brave. Luna looked at him quietly. He was, she said. He knew exactly what he was doing. He wanted to. Harry nodded. She tilted her head. You're different. Everyone says that. No, this is specifically different, she said. You're resolved. You don't have that thing you used to have where you were simultaneously trying and not trying to carry all of it. She paused. The Raxperts are completely gone from you. Your aura is very loud. Harry looked at her. That's a compliment, she said. I know, Harry said, and found he was smiling. I need your help with something. I know that too, she said pleasantly. He told her about the resurrection stone, not the soul fragment working, but what came after. The stone itself. Its boundary function and what death had said about the balance of life and death. There was something Luna understood about the space between things that none of the others did, a native fluency with the idea that the boundary between existing and not existing was a place rather than a wall. He needed her to understand the stone's full nature because she was the one he trusted most with that understanding. "The veil," she said, when he'd finished. "At the ministry. When we were there in 5th year." She looked at him steadily. "I told you I could hear them talking. Through the veil." "Yes. That's the same mechanism," she said. "A boundary you can locate. Not a barrier. A membrane." She considered. "The stone, in your hands, with the acknowledgement, it's not calling anything through the membrane. It's recognizing that the membrane exists." "Yes," Harry said. "That's exactly right." "Good," she said, satisfied. "Then you understand what you have." She paused. "What do you need me to do?" "Stay close to me during the battle," he said. "If I need to use the stone, not to call anyone, but to work with the boundary directly, I need someone near me who understands what I'm doing. Who won't misinterpret it. In case you look like you're dying but you're not," she said. "Yes," Harry said. "In case I look like that." "I understand," she said. "I'll be close." The owl arrived at noon. Big, black, and completely unafraid of the light, the kind of owl that was not naturally occurring but had been specifically enchanted for this. It landed on the table in the great hall and dropped its letter and flew away, and the letter's seal cracked before anyone touched it, the magic of it insisting on opening itself. Harry read it. He read it and then he set it on the table and looked at the people around him. "He's coming tonight," Harry said. "Full assault. He's given us until sundown to surrender, which he knows we won't do, so the assault begins at sundown." He paused. "He's bringing everyone." The great hall absorbed this. He watched it move through the room, the shift of breath, the straightening of spines, the specific recalibration that happens when a thing that has been anticipated becomes a thing that is imminent. Kingsley spoke first. "Numbers?" "He doesn't say. But he says everyone. Which means every Death Eater who can stand. Snatchers. Possibly giants." Harry paused. "And he says he'll offer terms to anyone who surrenders before the fighting begins. He says anyone who gives him Harry Potter can go free." Silence. Then McGonagall said, with a dryness that could have stripped paint, "How generous." And Neville said, very simply and without any drama at all, "Nobody here is doing that." The room confirmed it. Harry looked around at the faces, every one of them, Old Order members and young DA members and Hogwarts staff and frightened people who had chosen courage over fear and people who had never had to choose before and were choosing now. He looked at Ron, who was holding the sword and looking back with the same simplicity he'd had since they were 11. He looked at Hermione, whose expression communicated every calculation she'd made and every conclusion she'd reached and the fact that all of them, every single one, had arrived at the same place. He looked at Ginny, who was already scanning the room with the tactical attention of someone assessing positions and trajectories. He looked at Luna, who was looking at the ceiling with an expression of profound contentment and murmured something to herself that he was fairly sure was about Nargles but might have been about the sky. He thought about Vault 0. About Amber Light and 7 names. About the warmth that had been in his chest since the acknowledgement and the clarity that had been there since the soul fragment was removed and the completeness of what he was now carrying. He thought about tonight. "All right," Harry said. He stood up. "We have until sundown. Let's use it." The afternoon was full of work, and the work was exactly the kind that people do when they have accepted the shape of something and are filling the time before it arrives with everything useful that can still be done. Wards were reinforced, positions were assigned, messages were sent. Hagrid, in the forest, who received his message via a centaur and sent back his response via the same, which was simply that he was coming and to leave the gate open. Bill and Fleur, who arrived through the Hogsmeade Flue at 2 in the afternoon. Charlie Weasley, who arrived with 3 colleagues from the Romanian Dragon Sanctuary at 3, for reasons he declined to explain fully but which involved the phrase, "We thought you might want some air support." That last part made even Ron laugh. The afternoon sun moved across the great hall windows, and Harry sat with a cup of tea that creature brought him without being asked and watched the light move. Around him the castle prepared. Above him the enchanted ceiling showed clear sky, autumn blue and cloudless, the kind of sky that would have been beautiful on any other day. He thought about Dumbledore's plan. The boy who had to die. The willing sacrifice. The Elder Wand and the Horcrux and the walk into the forest. He thought about how close it had been, how close to being that plan, that ending, the one the old man had built so carefully on such a painful foundation. He thought about what Death had said in Vault 0. Do not waste this. He hadn't. The sun reached the window's lower frames and the light turned amber, and Harry set down his tea and stood up and looked at the door of the great hall and felt the evening coming in the way you feel it, not with dread, not with excitement, with the specific quality of attention that comes when something very large is very close. Harry. Ginny was beside him. I know, he said. She's nearly down. I know. He turned to look at her. The amber light was in her hair and on her face, and she was looking at him with the clarity of someone who has accepted what is coming and chosen to be present in the moment before it arrives. Come back, she said. Simply. Yes, he said. Simply. The sun touched the horizon. The wards screamed. Chapter 6, The Last Sovereign. The wards didn't just scream. They shattered. Not the castle's foundations. Hogwarts absorbed the first wave of the assault the way a mountain absorbs weather, with the patience of something that has been standing through worse for 1,000 years. But the outer perimeter wards, the ones the Order had spent the afternoon reinforcing, came down in a cascade that Harry felt through the soles of his feet, a deep structural vibration that ran up through the stone and arrived in his chest alongside the acknowledgement warmth like two notes finding a chord. He was already moving. The great hall behind him erupted into organized action, Kingsley's voice cutting through clearly, positions being taken, the specific sound of a prepared force activating rather than a frightened one scrambling. Harry heard McGonagall's voice below that, the curt authoritative cadence of a command, and then the deeper grinding sound of stone on stone as the castle's enchanted armory began to wake. He hit the entrance hall at a run, Ron and Hermione falling into step on either side with the automatic precision of 7 years, Ginny a half step behind and slightly to the right where she'd always been in the practiced geography of how they moved together. Through the great doors and onto the front steps, and the view that met them was enormous. The grounds were lit by the fire of curses already hitting the outer walls, red and green and white blue, the color palette of war, beautiful in the specific horrible way that destructive energy is always beautiful when seen from sufficient distance. Across the grounds, pouring through the broken outer perimeter like a tide finding a gap in a seawall, the Death Eaters came. Dozens of them. More than dozens. Dark-robed figures moving with the purposeful urgency of people executing a plan, their wands up, their dark marks visible even from this distance, glowing livid against the pale undersides of their forearms. Behind them, larger shapes. Giants. 2 of them, already visible above the tree line, their footsteps arriving as a bass frequency below the higher-pitched sounds of spellfire. And above it all, at the center of the advancing wave, a figure in white. Voldemort moved differently now than Harry had ever seen him move. Not the controlled, cold-blooded glide of the man who had appeared in the Department of Mysteries or stood in the graveyard with the patience of something that had all the time in the world. He moved with velocity, forward, purposeful, driven by something that Harry recognized after a moment as urgency. He was afraid. Not the fear of defeat, not the ordinary mortal fear of injury or death. The fear of the already mortal discovering their mortality. Every Horcrux gone, the tether he'd built over decades cut, the soul he'd fractured so thoroughly that even its pieces couldn't anchor him anymore, Voldemort was racing toward Hogwarts because standing still with that knowledge was intolerable, and attacking was the only thing he'd ever known how to do with intolerable things. Harry watched him come and felt very clear. Kingsley's people take the east flank, Harry said. Order veterans hold the main approach. Neville's DA flanks from the castle interior. They know every corridor, every shortcut. They can respond to anything that gets through the outer defense faster than anyone else. Snape manages the north wall and the internal security. He paused. The giants, Charlie, Ron said. Yes. Harry looked at the sky, where two dragons, actual, real, free dragons from the Romanian sanctuary, were becoming visible above the tree-line, banking toward the advancing assault with the focused attention of creatures that had opinions about giants. Charlie's got the giants. That is genuinely the best sentence I've ever heard, Ron said. The next 20 minutes were, in the particular way that battles are, both very long and completely without duration, a compression of time that reduced everything to the immediate, the urgent, the next 3 seconds, the next spell, the next position. Harry moved through it with the Elder Wand in his hand and the fullness of what he was carrying running like a current through every action. He did not hide. He had stood at the center of every fight of his life in one way or another, and he'd always been reactive, responding to threats, adapting to what came at him, surviving by the combination of his instincts and his luck and the loyalty of the people beside him. He was still all of those things. But he was something else now too. Something that changed the geometry of the battle around him in ways he could feel rather than calculate. Death Eaters who came at him directly came at him with curses designed for someone who needed to be careful, who needed to shield and dodge and find cover. They came at the Harry Potter they remembered, the boy who survived by running and hiding and hoping. He didn't run. He didn't hide. The first group of 4 came around the east corner of the castle and Harry was already facing them, the Elder Wand moving in the arc of something that had no name in any standard curriculum, not a stunning spell, not an Expelliarmus, not any of the spells that had clean names and committee-approved applications. It was the wand reading his intent, and his intent was very simple: stop them, hold them, do not kill them. 4 people hit the ground in positions that would keep them there until someone made the deliberate effort to free them, and Harry had already moved past them. Hermione was behind him, covering the angle he'd left open. Ron was on his left with the sword, and the sword in Ron's hands was extraordinary, not because it was magic, though it was, but because Ron Weasley had always been better in a genuine crisis than anyone gave him credit for, including Ron Weasley. They fought across the grounds and the grounds fought back in their favor. The Whomping Willow, unprovoked and enthusiastic, was making significant contributions to the east flank. The enchanted suits of armor were a chaos engine in the best possible sense. Peeves, who Harry had always considered an annoyance, was proving to be a genuine strategic asset in a way that nobody had formally planned for but that McGonagall had apparently predicted, because she'd given him a specific instruction set that he was following with the gleeful intensity of someone who had waited a very long time to be told that destruction was appropriate. The first giant reached the outer wall and Norberta, Charlie's dragon, the one he'd grown from an egg, the one Hagrid had raised in a wooden crate in his hut, hit it from above with a wall of fire that was not subtle and was not targeted and was absolutely effective. The second giant turned and ran. Harry was on the main approach when he felt it. Not a spell. Not a physical threat. The specific, focused attention of someone looking at him from across a battlefield with the complete concentrated fixation of a person for whom everything else has become irrelevant. He stopped. He turned. Voldemort was 40 feet away. The battle continued around them, spells crossing overhead, people shouting, the sound of Hogwarts defending itself, but between them a pocket of relative stillness had formed in the way these pockets sometimes form, the eye of the storm, not because the storm has paused but because 2 things at its center have stopped to register each other. Voldemort looked at him. Harry looked at Voldemort. "Everyone clear the field," Harry said, not loudly, and the quality of the command, the particular authority running underneath it, the thing that had nothing to do with volume, moved through the people nearest them immediately. Fighters on both sides felt it and stepped back without fully knowing why, some instinct responding to a frequency below conscious thought. Ron and Hermione didn't move. Harry looked at them briefly. Ron's jaw was set and his hand was on Harry's shoulder for exactly 1 second and he stepped back. Hermione's expression was the most complicated thing Harry had ever seen on a human face, 17 years of friendship and calculation and absolute loyalty and the very specific grief of someone watching someone they love step into something they cannot follow, and she stepped back. Ginny was 20 feet to his right, positioned between him and a group of 3 Death Eaters she'd been holding single-handedly, and she looked at him and gave him the smallest nod and turned her full attention back to the 3 Death Eaters, which was the most trust Harry had ever felt expressed through a body movement. Luna was behind him, somewhere in the middle distance, and he knew she was there the way he now knew things, not with his eyes but with the awareness that the acknowledgement had sharpened. He looked at Voldemort. "Tom," he said. The reaction was instantaneous and specific. Not the fury that the name usually triggered, something more volatile than fury, the specific response of a person touched at the exposed nerve, the name arriving like light through a gap in armor that had been maintained for decades. "Do not," Voldemort said, very quietly. "Tom Riddle," Harry said. "Born in a Muggle orphanage in London. Brilliant. Frightened. Alone in a world that didn't make sense until he found out he was magic, and then used every gift he had to make himself invulnerable to the thing that frightened him most." Harry paused. "You almost did it. Genuinely. 7 Horcruxes, an immortal body, a magical world at your feet. You almost made yourself untouchable." "You are a boy," Voldemort said, "playing at understanding things you cannot comprehend. You split your soul into 7 pieces because you were afraid to die," Harry said. "And then you spent 50 years killing people to prove you weren't afraid of anything." He paused. "I don't need to comprehend you, Tom. I've been carrying a piece of you inside me for 17 years. I know what you're made of." Voldemort's eyes moved to Harry's scar. "It's gone," Harry said. "Last night. I removed it cleanly. You're not in me anymore. Whatever connection we had, it was always from your side to mine, wasn't it? Your soul reaching for the fragment you'd accidentally placed in me. That's how you could feel me. That's why the connection ran the way it ran." He paused. "When I removed it, you lost the last thing tethering you to anything living." Voldemort was very still. "You're mortal," Harry said. "Completely. Since last night. No Horcruxes, no fragment, no anchor. Everything you built across 50 years to avoid this moment, gone." He let that land. "And you came anyway." "I came," Voldemort said, "because you are still here." "Yes," Harry said. "I am. The prophecy, neither can live while the other survives," Harry said. "Yes. I've thought about that a great deal." He paused. "But the prophecy was made about a boy. About the circumstances that would create the one with the power to defeat you. It was never about what he would become." He raised the Elder Wand. "The wand knows me, Tom. Its last master gave it to me without knowing he did. Every master it's had since Antioch Peveril has been using a fraction of it. Do you know why?" Voldemort's eyes were on the wand. "Because you can only use it at its full capacity if you're the Master of Death," Harry said. "Every dark wizard who stole it or won it or took it, they got the power. They didn't get the instrument. The instrument has been waiting." He paused. "For me." "It won't matter," Voldemort said, and the cold calculation was back in his voice, the composed exterior reasserting itself over the volatility, the architecture of his terrible competence settling back into place. "You are one. You have fewer people than you started with," Harry said. "The giants are gone. Your eastern flank is held. The Order has your western approach contained, and Kingsley Shacklebolt is a better tactical commander than anyone you brought tonight." He paused. "And Bellatrix," he had been watching for this. Voldemort's gaze moved, just briefly, a fraction of a second, the instinctive check for his most loyal instrument. "She's not here," Harry said. She's not here," Harry said again. "She's been not here since she came to Hogwarts 3 nights ago and looked at me and did her own arithmetic. Where she is right now I don't know. But she didn't come tonight. He watched Voldemort's face. You knew she was wavering. That's why you didn't tell her about the Horcruxes. You've known she was pulling away and you couldn't. He paused. You couldn't fix it, because fixing it would require you to give her something real. And everything you have to give is built on a lie. Enough, Voldemort said. He cast. The killing curse arrived with the sound that Harry would never fully unhear regardless of how many times he'd been near it, the rushing, punching crack of it, the color that was only that color when it was that spell. Harry moved aside from it with the unhurried precision of someone who has been reading this moment since Vault 0, the curse passing through the space where he'd been standing and hitting the stone of the castle wall behind him and leaving a scorch mark in the shape of absolutely nothing. Harry didn't cast back. He let Voldemort come. 3 more curses, rapid, the sequence of someone who has been using lethal magic since before Harry was born and has refined it to something approaching artistry, diagonal approach, cutting off left and right simultaneously, the 3rd curse timed to catch the dodge from the 2nd. Harry stepped through the 1st, ducked the 2nd, and let the 3rd hit a shield that he raised not from the Elder Wand but from the sheer authority of his position, the 7th-house ward, the Master's protection, something that Voldemort's killing curse hit with the sound of 2 enormous forces making contact and came off deflected, spinning away into the dark. Voldemort stopped. He stared at the deflected killing curse. Your unforgivables don't work on me, Harry said. Not tonight. Not like this. He paused. The 3 unforgivables require you to mean them. You have to mean it, the cruelty, the domination, the killing. You have to want it completely. He watched Voldemort's face. But you don't want to kill me, Tom. You want to not die. Those are completely different things, and the wand knows the difference. You are lecturing me, Voldemort said, very quietly, about magic. Yes, Harry said. How is it? Something crossed Voldemort's face that might, in a different face on a different person, have been the response to something unexpected. His hand adjusted on his wand, the Elder Wand's brother, almost, the twin phoenix feather wand that had always been the counterpart to Harry's own holly, now broken and replaced, never quite the same instrument. His eyes were doing the calculation, the real one underneath the performance, running through every variable with the extraordinary intelligence that had always been there. He attacked again. Not the killing curse this time. Something else, a curse that had no name in the standard literature, the kind of magic that existed below documentation, that Voldemort had found or created in the course of decades of exploration in the darkest corners of magical knowledge. Harry felt it coming before it arrived, the Elder Wand reading the nature of the incoming magic, giving him the shape of it, and he met it not with a counter-curse but with something specific. He reached for the boundary. The stone was in his left hand, he'd taken it from his pocket as Voldemort had started his approach, holding it not activated, not summoning anything, but present. The boundary instrument in the same hands as the boundary authority. And now he used it, not against Voldemort's magic directly, but against the place where Voldemort's magic touched the world. The line between the living magic and the dead magic. The place where curses built on death had to cross through the territory that was now, technically and actually and formally, Harry's. The curse unraveled. Not dramatically. Not with a flash or an explosion. It simply came apart, the way things come apart when the logic that holds them together is removed. The components of it dispersed into the air like smoke in wind, and then there was no curse, and there was no counter-curse, just Harry standing with both hands raised and the 2 Hallows held and the Elder Wand warm and ready. Voldemort looked at him. Truly looked. For the first time in this engagement, the performance fell completely away, and what was underneath it was what Harry had suspected, what he'd seen briefly in the East study of the manor, in the expression that crossed Voldemort's face when Nagini went still. The bedrock of everything Tom Riddle had built his enormous terrible life on top of. Fear. You've already lost, Harry said quietly. Not tonight, long before tonight. The moment you split your soul the first time, you lost. Not to me. To the choice itself. He paused. Everything you've done since then has been trying to outrun that choice. The Horcruxes, the followers, the war. All of it is just running. He held Voldemort's gaze. I'm not running from anything. You think your new authority makes you invincible, Voldemort said. No, Harry said. I think I can lose. I think I could die here tonight. He paused. I just don't think I will. He raised the Elder Wand. And you don't either. That's why you're afraid. Voldemort looked at the wand. At Harry's face. At the Elder Wand and the Resurrection Stone and the invisibility cloak visible at Harry's pocket, all three Hallows present, all three in use, the full weight of the acknowledgement running through them in the way that instruments run at full capacity when the right hand is holding them. He looked at all of this and he saw the truth of it. And then he did what he had always done with the truth, he attacked it. The next exchange was fast and silent and enormous. No words, no announcements, no performative theatrics. Voldemort cast everything he had, the full repertoire of 50 years of dark magical exploration, the accumulated power of a man who had always been genuinely, extraordinarily gifted and had spent his entire life sharpening that gift to a lethal point. He was extraordinary. Harry had always known this and never made the mistake of forgetting it, and he didn't forget it now. But the Elder Wand was not a wand tonight. Death had said it was a key, not a wand. Harry had not fully understood this until now, standing in the middle of the most powerful magical duel of his life, the instrument in his hand functioning not as a conduit for his magic but as a conduit for something older, something that existed in the space between the casting of a spell and its arrival, in the gap between intent and consequence, in the place where all magic ultimately came from and ultimately returned to. Every curse Voldemort cast arrived at that gap and found Harry already there. Not blocking. Not countering. Simply present in the place where the magic had to pass, with the authority of the person who governed that place, and the magic passed through without landing. Not deflected, dissolved. The way sound dissolves in a room designed for it. Voldemort felt it. He felt the futility of it the way you feel the futility of running against the tide, not through reason, not through calculation, but through the body's own knowledge that something is not going to yield. His face changed. The composure held, because the composure was profound and trained and had survived things that would have shattered most people, but underneath it something enormous was shifting. Harry lowered the Elder Wand to his side. Stop, he said. Voldemort stopped. The dynamic of the engagement had been reorienting itself across the last 3 minutes in a direction that left him with nothing productive ahead, and Harry's saying stop arrived simultaneously with Voldemort's own internal recognition of this. It's over, Harry said. The words hit the silence and stayed in it. You are a child, Voldemort said, and the words were constructed carefully, the last fortress wall. You keep saying that, Harry said. It stopped being a useful argument around the time I carried death's acknowledgement into a duel with you. He looked at Voldemort steadily. You can keep fighting. You have enough magic left for it. But every spell costs you now, costs you in a way it doesn't cost me, because everything you cast crosses through territory I govern, and it comes back diminished. He paused. You feel that? Voldemort said nothing. You feel it, Harry said. Yes. The silence was full. Around them the battle sounds had changed, still present, still ongoing, but differently. Harry was aware of it at the edge of his attention, the Death Eater lines were breaking. Not because they'd been defeated in the field, though they were being defeated in the field. Because the thing that had been holding them, the certainty, the invincibility of their lord, the organizational principle of absolute power, was visibly failing in real time 40 feet from where they were fighting. People saw things. People adjusted to what they saw. Some of the Death Eaters began to disapparate. Voldemort heard the cracks of their departure. He heard them the way you hear something you've been dreading, recognized, registered, and set aside to be reckoned with, but not now, not yet, because the thing in front of him required everything first. Tom, Harry said, and the name again landed the same way it always did. It ends tonight. The war ends, your cause ends, the occupation of the ministry ends. That happens regardless of what you do in the next 5 minutes. He paused. But what happens to you is still, I'm giving you the option to make a choice about what happens to you. Voldemort looked at him with an expression that was hard to name. Not contempt, something more sophisticated than contempt, the look of a person hearing something completely outside the map of their understanding and trying to locate it. You're offering me terms, he said. I'm offering you the chance to stop, Harry said. Not surrender, I don't think you're capable of surrender in the standard sense. Just stop. The Horcruxes are gone. You're mortal. The war is ending regardless. Stop, and what comes next for you is law and judgment, and whatever Wisengamot process applies to 50 years of what you've done. He paused. Keep going, and I'm going to end this differently. You mean kill me, Voldemort said. I mean remove you, Harry said. Which is different. He paused. Death told me it was waiting. Has been waiting. There's a place for the pieces of your soul, the dispersed fragments, the thing that's left in you, something at the boundary, something that holds what can't hold itself. He paused. I am the person who governs that boundary. If you force me to use that authority, you're threatening me with death, Voldemort said, and there was almost something in his voice, some quality that was ancient and fundamental. No, Harry said. I'm offering you the only thing that might be left for you that isn't that. He held the man's gaze, the red eyes that had terrified a generation. I don't want to kill you. I don't want to be the person who kills you. Not because I'm afraid to, I'm not afraid of you, Tom, I stopped being afraid of you in a vault under Gringotts, but because killing you isn't what I am. He paused. You are the one who has always chosen killing. I'm choosing something different. Voldemort looked at him for a long, long moment. The battle was winding down around them. Harry could feel it in the way you feel weather changing, the quality of the sound, the decrease in spell fire, the cracks of disapparition coming faster and more frequently. Kingsley's voice, somewhere east. McGonagall's. Neville's, loud and clear and steady in a way that Neville's voice had never been when he was 11 years old. Voldemort heard it all. He heard the ending of it. And Harry watched the thing that happened next with the full attention of someone who has been waiting for it without knowing he was waiting. Voldemort's composure didn't break. It didn't collapse or shatter or anything dramatic. It released. The architecture of it, the 50 years of careful, deliberate construction of the image of something invincible and inevitable, just quietly, finally, let go. And what was underneath was not weakness. Was not grief. Was not anything so structured. It was the specific, total exhaustion of someone who has been running from something for decades and has run out of ground. He looked at Harry. And Harry looked back at the man who had murdered his parents, had defined the shape of his entire life, had reached forward 17 years to mark him before he could speak, had used him and feared him and hunted him and been hunted by him, and felt something that was not forgiveness and not hatred and not the complex mixture of both that he'd carried for years. He felt very clear. Voldemort raised his wand. Not to cast. The motion was not the motion of an attack. It was something else, something that the wand itself seemed to recognize, because the thin hawthorn wand, his replacement, his borrowed instrument, nothing like the twin Koryu, trembled in his hand with the specific trembling of something that has run out of purpose. I don't know how to stop, Voldemort said. The words were very quiet. So quiet that Harry wasn't certain, for a half-second, whether he'd actually heard them or constructed them from the shape of what he was seeing. I know, Harry said. I know that. 50 years, Voldemort said, and the voice was flat and stripped of everything it had always contained. It was all I knew how to do. I know, Harry said again. Voldemort looked at him one more time. The red eyes, the ruined face, the white hands, the body of a man who had reached for something beyond human and found only the reflection of his own terror. He looked at Harry with the eyes of Tom Riddle, which were underneath everything else, which had always been underneath. He lowered his wand. It fell from his hand. The wand hit the grass, and the moment it left his grip something happened, not an explosion, not a flash, nothing visible from outside. But Harry felt it. The last fragment of the most fractured soul he had ever been near, the piece that had survived in Voldemort himself because there had been nowhere left for it to go, completing its dissolution. Not death in any standard sense. The boundary opening for a moment, the thing that was left of Tom Riddle passing through it, and Harry governing that passage with the authority he'd been given. Not a killing. A completion. The body of Lord Voldemort folded, slowly, and lay still on the grass of Hogwarts. Harry stood and breathed. The wand at his feet glowed once, the hawthorn wand, the replacement, giving off one brief amber light in the dark, and went still. The elder wand in Harry's hand was warm and quiet. The battle was over. He could feel it in the sudden change in the quality of the sounds around him, spellfire stopping, voices rising differently, the shift from the sound of a fight to the sound of a fight that has ended. He heard Kingsley's voice giving orders. He heard McGonagall. He heard, distantly, a sound that might have been Hagrid sobbing with relief. He heard Ron. Harry. Ron was there, not running, just covering the ground between them quickly with the sword still in his hand and his face reading everything that had just happened without needing to be told any of it. He stopped beside Harry and looked at the body on the ground and then at Harry's face. "You all right?" he said. "Yes," Harry said. "It's done. It's done." Ron exhaled. He looked at the ground again, the body, the fallen wand. He looked at the castle behind them, its lights blazing, the sounds of people beginning to move in the way people move when the worst is over. He looked at the sky, which was clearing, clouds moving away from a moon that was almost full and very bright. "Right," Ron said. That was all. Hermione arrived at almost the same moment from the other direction, and she went to Harry and took both his hands and looked at them and then looked at his face with the thoroughness of someone performing the most important inventory of their life. She didn't say anything for a long moment. "It worked," she said finally. "Yes," Harry said. "All of it. The stone working, the boundary work, yes." She squeezed his hands and let go and stepped back and put her hand over her mouth briefly, and that was Hermione's equivalent of the thing Ron had communicated by standing beside him, and Harry recognized it as such. Ginny came at a run from the eastern approach and stopped short when she saw the body and then looked at Harry, and the assessment she made was instantaneous and total. She crossed the remaining distance and she was in his arms before either of them had decided that was what was happening, and she held on with the specific grip of someone who has been prepared for the worst and is processing the best. He held on back. "Told you," she said into his shoulder. "What?" "That you'd come back." "You said come back," he said. "I did." "You did," she agreed. Luna was nearby, standing a few feet off, looking at the sky with the expression of someone watching something resolve. Harry looked at her over Ginny's shoulder. "Can you feel it?" he asked her. Luna looked from the sky to him. "The boundary settling," she said. "Yes. Everything's very calm on that side." She paused. "They're at rest. All of them." She paused again. "He is too, I think." "What was left of him?" Harry nodded. He looked at the castle. Hogwarts stood in the moonlight with the specific quality that it had always had and that he'd never properly named, the quality of a place that has outlasted everything thrown at it and intends to continue doing so, the permanent, patient, enormous quality of stone and magic that has been here for 1,000 years and will be here for 1,000 more. Its windows were bright. Inside, he could hear people. Neville appeared at the top of the front steps with the DA behind him and a gash above his eye that had bled freely and been ignored for the last 40 minutes, and his expression was the expression of someone who has been expecting something very bad and has received something very different and is still arriving at the truth of it. Is he? Neville started. Yes, Harry said. Neville sat down on the steps. Just sat down, right there, with Gryffindor's sword across his knees and his hands hanging loose and his face doing the complete, unguarded thing that faces do when they've been held under tremendous pressure for a very long time and the pressure releases all at once. Okay, Neville said. To himself, mostly. Okay. In the hours that followed, the long, complicated, exhausted hours that are the aftermath of something enormous, Harry moved through Hogwarts in a way that felt different from every other time he'd moved through it. The healing teams were working, Madame Pomfrey coordinating with the organized ferocity she brought to anything medical. The dead were being tended with the specific, careful dignity that the dead deserved. Kingsley was managing the early communications, ministry contacts, aura units, the legal apparatus of a world that had just changed and needed to know the shape of what it had changed to. Harry did what needed to be done. He spoke to people. He was present. He answered questions that needed answers and deferred the ones that needed more time and didn't pretend to have things resolved that weren't resolved yet. He found Lupin sitting in the entrance hall with Tonks beside him, both of them looking like people who had been prepared to not survive the night and were quietly revising their understanding of the morning. Teddy, Harry said. Your son. He's safe, Tonks said. He's with my mother. She looked at Harry with an expression that was exhausted and complicated and deeply warm. We were prepared, I know, Harry said. Go home. Go to your son. Lupin looked at him. The parental quality in his face was enormous and unguarded. You did it, he said. We did it, Harry said. He found Arthur and Molly in the Great Hall, and Molly pulled him in again with the same force as always and he let her completely, and Arthur gripped his shoulder with the firm, quiet pride of a man who has watched a boy become something extraordinary and is finding the words for it somewhat beyond him. Percy's all right, Arthur said. He came through the flu at 11. He paused. He's here. Good, Harry said. That's good. He found McGonagall directing the cleanup of the grounds with the systematic efficiency of someone who deals with grief by ensuring everything around it is in proper order. She looked at him with those sharp eyes and said nothing for a long moment. Dumbledore, she said finally. What he asked of Snape. What he planned. Yes, Harry said. I know most of it. Not all of it. He didn't tell you enough, she said. The words were very measured, carrying several years of complex feeling beneath their surface. He told me what he thought I needed, Harry said. He was mostly right. Where he wasn't, Harry paused. He was working without all the information. So was I, until Gringotts. McGonagall looked at the grounds, the battle-scarred grounds, the marks of spellfire and struggle, the castle's stone carrying the evidence of the night in scorch marks and damage that would need attending. You'll need to address the Wizengamot, she said. The ministry. Everything. She looked back at him. The political work. Yes, Harry said. I know. He paused. Not tonight. No, she agreed. Not tonight. He found Snape in the hospital wing, not injured, sitting in a chair between two beds with the expression of a man who has arrived somewhere he did not expect to arrive and is taking his time deciding what to do about it. Harry sat down beside him. Neither of them said anything for a moment. He knew, Snape said finally. Dumbledore. He believed you'd find a way that didn't require dying. He didn't build the plan on it, he couldn't, the uncertainty was too great. But he believed it was possible. He paused. He told me once, in the portrait. He said, the boy is more than the prophecy. The prophecy was a lens. He was always more than the lens. Harry was quiet. He was right, Snape said. The words cost something. As usual. As usual, Harry agreed. Snape looked at him with those dark eyes that had been watching him for 7 years with the specific complicated attention of someone who sees his past and his debt and his task all in the same face. Something in them was different now. The task was done, the debt was, Severus, Harry said. Snape looked up. Thank you, Harry said. Simple, direct, the way he'd said things all night. For all of it. Everything you did that nobody knew about. Everything you carried alone. He paused. He couldn't have done any of it without you. I couldn't have done any of it without what you gave him. Snape was very still. Lily, Harry said, which was the most honest thing he could offer, the truth of what ran underneath everything Snape had done. She'd be, he paused, feeling the weight of what he was saying, and deciding to say it anyway because it was true and true things deserved to be spoken. She'd be grateful. Something in Snape's face moved in the way that things move when they've been held in the same position for very long and the holding is finally, completely over. He didn't speak. He turned away and looked at the wall of the hospital wing, and Harry let him, and after a moment Harry stood and left him there. He walked back to the grounds. The moon was still up, lower now, and the night was very clear. He could see stars, properly, for the first time in a long time, the sky clear of the magical interference that had been a permanent feature of Voldemort's Britain, the darkness overhead genuinely dark and genuinely full of light. He stood on the steps of Hogwarts. In his pocket, 3 objects. The Elder Wand, warm and quiet, waiting. The Resurrection Stone, no longer warm, having completed its part. The Invisibility Cloak, folded impossibly small, permanent. He thought about what he'd promised Death in Vault 0. He took the Elder Wand out. He held it for a moment, the instrument that had been waiting for him, that had functioned as a key in his hands in a way it had never functioned for anyone, that had helped him end a war and govern a boundary and do a thing that no one in history had done before. He carried it down the steps and across the grounds to Dumbledore's tomb, which stood white and still at the edge of the lake, the water beside it very calm in the moonlight. The tomb was sealed but it opened for him, the way everything now opened for him, not with force, not with magic, just with the acknowledgement that he was the person who had the authority to ask. He looked at Dumbledore. I did what you would have done, he said quietly. Or what you wanted to do and couldn't. Or, he paused. I did it differently. I did it my way. I hope that's all right. He paused again. I think it's all right. He placed the Elder Wand in the tomb. The tomb sealed. He walked back toward the castle, the night air cold and clear around him, the stone in his pocket and the cloak at his chest and the feeling in his chest that had been there since Vault 0, the warmth of it, the completeness of it, present and steady and quiet. Ron was sitting on the steps with a piece of cold toast from somewhere, eating with the uncomplicated appetite of someone whose body has made a unilateral decision about priorities. He looked up when Harry came back. Where'd you go? Dumbledore's tomb. Ron looked at his hands. At the absence of the Elder Wand. The wand? Back where it belongs. Ron nodded. He offered the toast. Want some? Yes, Harry said, and sat down beside him, and ate cold toast on the steps of Hogwarts in the middle of the night, the castle warm and lit behind them, the grounds quiet and the war over. After a while Hermione came and sat on Harry's other side, and Ginny sat beside Ron, and Neville was on the step below them with Luna, and the 6 of them sat in the particular comfortable silence of people who have been through something enormous together and have arrived on the other side of it still intact. What happens now? Neville asked. Harry looked at the grounds. At the sky. At the stars that were visible again properly for the first time. We fix things, he said. The Ministry, the Wizengamot, the laws that need changing. The families that need help. The people in Azkaban who shouldn't be there. He paused. We do the work. And you? Ginny said. With the 7 houses, the authority, I'll use it until it's not needed, Harry said. Then I'll pass what can be passed and keep what should be kept and get on with being a person. He paused. I want to be a person for a while. Just a person. He paused again. A person who plays Quidditch occasionally, visits Hagrid, and possibly, eventually, gets some sleep. Sleep, Ron said. Yes. I support that. Luna was looking at the sky. The Nargles will be much calmer now, she said, to no one in particular. That's good, Hermione said. Very reassuring. I thought so, Luna agreed. The night stretched out around them, enormous and clear and full of the specific quality of things that have resolved, not finished. Nothing was ever finished, but resolved. The immediate crisis passed and the shape of what came next visible and possible and real. Harry leaned back on his hands and looked at the stars and felt the completeness of what he was carrying, not just the Hallows, not just the 7 houses, not just the acknowledgement. The year behind him, the friends beside him, the people inside the castle who were alive and safe and exhausted and themselves. Lupin and Tonks going home to Teddy. Neville with Gryffindor's sword across his knees. Snape sitting alone in a hospital wing with the specific solitude of someone whose purpose has been completed and who is now, possibly for the first time, free to figure out what else there is. He thought about death, in a vault, speaking with the dry patience of something that had waited 3 centuries for one specific moment. Do not waste this. He hadn't. He thought about his parents, which he always thought about, which he would always think about, but differently now. Not with the specific grief of something permanently absent but with the warmth of something present in a different form, the way people remain present in the people who carry them forward. He thought about Sirius, which was the hardest thought, which was always the hardest thought. The stone is yours, Hermione had said. The cloak passes to your children. His children. He looked at Ginny beside him and she was looking at the grounds and not at him. But she was aware of him looking the way she'd always been aware of him, and her hand found his in the dark between them with the simplicity of something that has always been true and has finally been given permission to be itself. He held on. Around them Hogwarts breathed. 1,000 years of stone and magic and the accumulated weight of everything that had ever happened within its walls and outside them, all of it settling now into something quieter, the school returning to itself after a year of being something other than itself. Inside, someone laughed. A genuine laugh, unguarded, the kind that happens when relief is so complete that the body doesn't know what to do with it except laugh. Harry didn't know whose it was. It didn't matter. He listened to it carry through the night. The Master of Death sat on the steps of Hogwarts with cold toast and his best friends and the woman he loved, and the stars were out properly for the first time in a year. And somewhere beneath the oldest bank in Britain a vault that had been waiting for 3 centuries was finally, quietly, at rest. The war was over. The work was beginning. Harry Potter was ready for both.